The Grandfather Paradox explores the profound theme of time travel and identity through a core idea that seems deceptively simple, yet reveals the most dangerous human delusion that altering the past to change the future appears empowering, but doing so risks erasing the very reasons we exist, teaching us that the illusion of control through changing the past is ultimately self-destructive, because you may erase the author of your own story. But few people realize that behind this philosophical thought experiment lies one of the most devastating discoveries in human psychology, uncovered through a series of mysterious events that began in a theoretical physics laboratory in 1991, and has since revealed how the Grandfather Paradox serves as the perfect metaphor for understanding destructive human patterns of attempting to control reality by eliminating the very conditions that created their capacity for control. Dr. Sarah Chen, a brilliant theoretical physicist and philosopher at MIT, was found dead in her locked office on a snow-covered December evening in 1991, apparently from a massive stroke brought on by extreme psychological stress. The 45-year-old researcher, internationally renowned for her groundbreaking work on temporal causality and human identity and the psychology of paradoxical self-destruction, had been investigating the philosophical implications of time travel paradoxes when she uncovered something that would ultimately cost her her life. Her office showed signs of frantic activity, with complex equations covering every available surface, and her computer displaying evidence of desperate attempts to solve what appeared to be an impossible logical problem. A note found hidden inside her copy of Einstein's papers, written in increasingly erratic handwriting, read, "They don't want people to understand what the Grandfather Paradox reveals about human nature. It's not about time travel, it's about the fundamental human compulsion to destroy the very foundations of our own existence through attempts at total control. If people understood this pattern, they would recognize it everywhere in politics, relationships, and institutions." Sarah had been working on what she called Project Causal Awareness, a comprehensive investigation into how the Grandfather Paradox served as a perfect metaphor for understanding self-destructive human behavior patterns that appeared rational and empowering, but ultimately led to the elimination of conditions that made such behavior possible. Her research assistant, a young philosopher named Daniel Dennett, who would later become famous for his work on consciousness and free will, knew that Sarah had discovered something that threatened powerful systems built on maintaining illusions of control that actually functioned through systematic self-sabotage. The mystery began 5 years earlier when Sarah noticed something profoundly disturbing while analyzing the logical structure of temporal paradoxes and their relationship to real-world human behavior patterns. She had been exploring the philosophical implications of the Grandfather Paradox when she discovered that this thought experiment revealed fundamental truths about human psychology and self-destructive control patterns that extended far beyond theoretical physics into every area of human experience. Sarah's initial observations were revolutionary. When she examined the logical structure of the Grandfather Paradox, she realized that it perfectly described a widespread human psychological pattern where people attempted to solve problems by eliminating the very conditions that had created their ability to identify and address those problems, resulting in a form of existential suicide that appeared rational in the moment, but was ultimately self-defeating. Using interdisciplinary analysis combining theoretical physics, psychology, philosophy, and systems theory, Sarah had been documenting how the Grandfather Paradox logic appeared throughout human behavior in contexts ranging from personal relationships to political systems to technological development. What she found challenged fundamental assumptions about human rationality and revealed a hidden pattern of civilizational self-destruction that operated through the illusion of increasing control. The paradox structure revealed that humans consistently engaged in behaviors that seemed to increase their power and control over circumstances, while actually undermining the foundational conditions that made such control possible. Like a time traveler who kills their grandfather to prevent their own unhappy childhood, people routinely destroyed the very systems, relationships, and circumstances that had given them the capacity to recognize problems and attempt solutions. Modern research in psychology and systems theory has since validated Sarah's discoveries using advanced modeling and behavioral analysis. Research conducted at complexity science institutes and behavioral economics laboratories has consistently confirmed that humans demonstrate systematic tendencies towards self-defeating control attempts that follow the exact logical structure of the grandfather paradox across multiple domains of experience. Dr. Robert Cialdini's research on influence and persuasion has demonstrated how people regularly undermine their own credibility and effectiveness by attempting to gain control through methods that destroy the trust and relationships that make influence possible, following the same paradoxical logic of eliminating the conditions that enable the desired outcome. Sarah's research revealed that the grandfather paradox was not merely a theoretical physics puzzle, but a fundamental description of human self-destructive patterns that appeared throughout individual psychology, interpersonal relationships, organizational behavior, and even civilizational development. The pattern was so pervasive and consistent that it suggested something essential about human nature and the relationship between consciousness, control, and causality. The institutional conspiracy that Sarah uncovered was more subtle but far more pervasive than traditional power structures. Her hidden files revealed that various political, corporate, and educational systems had unconsciously organized themselves around grandfather paradox logic, systematically undermining their own foundational conditions while believing they were increasing their power and effectiveness. Political systems regularly destroyed the democratic institutions and social trust that made governance possible while claiming to strengthen their authority. Corporations eliminated the customer relationships and employee loyalty that generated long-term profits while pursuing short-term gains. Educational institutions undermined the critical thinking and intellectual curiosity that made learning possible while claiming to improve educational outcomes. Sarah had discovered what she termed systemic grandfather paradox syndrome, a phenomenon where human institutions consistently engaged in self-destructive behavior patterns that followed the exact logical structure of the time travel paradox, appearing rational and empowering in the short term, while systematically eliminating the conditions that made their existence and effectiveness possible. But the implications extended far beyond institutional behavior. When individuals understood the grandfather paradox pattern, they could begin recognizing it in their own lives and making different choices that preserved rather than destroyed the conditions that enabled their growth, relationships, and effectiveness. Sarah's breakthrough came when she started analyzing not just the logical structure of the paradox but the psychological mechanisms that made humans so susceptible to this pattern of self-defeating control attempts. She discovered that the grandfather paradox revealed fundamental aspects of human consciousness and the relationship between identity, causality, and the illusion of separateness that drove most destructive behavior. The research revealed that humans had difficulty understanding their embedded nature within the systems and relationships that shaped their identity and capabilities. Like a time traveler who imagined they could eliminate their grandfather without affecting their own existence, people consistently underestimated their dependence on the very conditions they sought to control or eliminate. The research also revealed that the grandfather paradox pattern was particularly prevalent during periods of stress, uncertainty, or perceived threat when people's capacity for systems thinking decreased while their desire for immediate control increased, leading to increasingly destructive attempts to manage circumstances through elimination of complexity, rather than skillful navigation of interdependence. Sarah had been preparing to publish her findings when she began receiving threatening communications from unknown sources warning her to abandon her research. A letter found in her files with all identifying information carefully removed read, "Dr. Chen, your research into paradoxical self-destruction threatens essential illusions that maintain social stability and institutional authority. We strongly advise you to discontinue this line of inquiry for your own safety and the protection of systems that depend on maintaining current approaches to control and problem solving." Her response, drafted but never sent, revealed her determination. "I will not allow the grandfather paradox pattern to continue destroying human potential and relationships. People deserve to understand how their attempts at control often eliminate the very conditions that make control possible. The paradox analysis will be published regardless of who benefits from maintaining destructive illusions of separateness and dominance." Sarah's death remains mysterious, but her research lived on through Dennett and other colleagues who had witnessed the documentation showing how the grandfather paradox revealed fundamental patterns of human self-destruction that operated through illusions of control and separateness. Dennett continued Sarah's work in secret, documenting how the paradox pattern appeared throughout human experience and could be recognized and interrupted through awareness and systems thinking. The research expanded to examine various manifestations of grandfather paradox logic and discovered that this pattern was one of the most pervasive sources of human suffering and institutional dysfunction, operating at every level from individual psychology to global civilization while remaining largely unconscious and unrecognized. Sarah's hidden research revealed the psychological mechanisms that made grandfather paradox thinking so persistent and compelling despite its ultimately self-destructive nature. Modern humans, especially those educated to believe in individual agency and control, were deeply invested in maintaining illusions of separateness that made them blind to their embedded nature within the systems and relationships that enabled their existence and effectiveness. The cultural programming around individual control and linear causality had created additional barriers to understanding the systemic and interdependent nature of existence that made grandfather paradox thinking appear rational rather than self-defeating. Most people had been taught to think in terms of isolated cause and effect rather than complex systems where every element was interconnected and dependent on every other element. Accurate systems education bypassed these barriers by providing information about interdependence and complexity that allowed people to recognize their embedded nature within the systems they sought to control. When people learned to think systemically rather than linearly, they could begin recognizing grandfather paradox patterns before engaging in self-destructive control attempts. The research also revealed that modern humans benefited enormously from understanding the grandfather paradox because it provided a framework for recognizing and interrupting self-destructive patterns while developing approaches to influence and change that preserved rather than destroyed the conditions that made such influence possible. Sarah's training protocols taught people to recognize grandfather paradox logic in their own thinking and behavior while developing alternative approaches to problem solving that honored rather than eliminated complexity and interdependence. A skilled observer might notice when solutions involved destroying the conditions that made problems solvable, and seek alternative approaches that worked with rather than against systemic relationships. The protocol involved what Sarah called paradox awareness, the ability to recognize when control attempts followed self-destructive logic while developing skillful means for creating change that preserved rather than eliminated the systemic conditions that made change possible. The research extended beyond theoretical analysis to understanding how grandfather paradox thinking affected modern approaches to relationships, problem solving, and social organization across various contexts where people attempted to gain control through methods that ultimately undermined their own effectiveness and well-being. The psychological impact of learning about grandfather paradox patterns was profound. People felt liberated from self-destructive control attempts when they understood how these patterns operated while developing more skillful approaches to creating change that honored rather than eliminated the interdependent conditions that made their lives possible. Sarah's research revealed that many relationship failures and personal struggles in modern contexts occurred because people had internalized grandfather paradox thinking that led them to destroy the very connections and circumstances that provided meaning, support, and growth opportunities in their attempts to gain control over their experience. The training involved teaching people to examine their control attempts while considering how their approaches to change and problem solving affected the systemic conditions that enabled their effectiveness and well-being. This required developing appreciation for complexity and interdependence rather than seeking simple solutions that eliminated rather than navigated difficult circumstances. Sarah's protocols addressed the common concern that recognizing grandfather paradox patterns would lead to helplessness or passivity in the face of problems that required active intervention. Her research showed that understanding systemic relationships actually enhanced effectiveness by encouraging approaches to change that worked with rather than against the complex conditions that made sustainable solutions possible. The timing of paradox education proved crucial in Sarah's research. People were most receptive to learning about self-destructive control patterns when they were experiencing the consequences of such attempts or when they were seeking more effective approaches to persistent problems that had resisted linear solutions. Sarah's protocols addressed the complexity of creating change while preserving the systemic conditions that made change possible. The research showed that effective intervention required careful attention to relationships and dependencies rather than aggressive elimination of perceived obstacles that might actually be essential elements of the systems people sought to influence. The research revealed that effective paradox education required helping people understand their embedded nature within complex systems while developing skills for creating change through influence and collaboration rather than control and domination that often destroyed the very conditions they sought to improve. Sarah's work demonstrated that paradox awareness was particularly important for people in leadership positions because their control attempts had broader systemic effects that could either enhance or undermine the conditions that made their organizations effective and sustainable. The relationship applications of Sarah's research were revolutionary. Couples who understood grandfather paradox thinking were able to recognize when their attempts to control their partners or relationships were actually destroying the trust and connection that made partnership possible, allowing them to develop more skillful approaches to creating change through influence and collaboration. The parenting applications were equally significant. Parents who learned about paradox patterns could recognize when their control attempts were undermining the very qualities they sought to develop in their children, encouraging approaches to guidance that preserved rather than eliminated their children's autonomy and intrinsic motivation. The business applications of Sarah's research created opportunities for developing organizational approaches that enhanced rather than undermined the conditions that made companies effective and sustainable. Leaders could recognize when their control attempts were destroying employee engagement, customer relationships, or innovative capacity while seeking alternatives that preserved these essential foundations. The political applications demonstrated how understanding grandfather paradox logic could inform approaches to governance and social change that strengthened rather than weakened democratic institutions and social trust. Political leaders could recognize when their power attempts were actually undermining the legitimacy and effectiveness that made governance possible. The research revealed that grandfather paradox thinking had widespread social and environmental consequences because it led to approaches to problem solving that consistently eliminated rather than preserved the complex conditions that made sustainable solutions possible, creating cycles of increasing control attempts and decreasing effectiveness. Sarah's research revealed that the grandfather paradox pattern was particularly dangerous in technological and environmental contexts where attempts to control natural systems often destroyed the very ecological relationships and diversity that made those systems stable and productive, leading to increasing intervention requirements and decreasing resilience. The research extended to understanding how grandfather paradox thinking affected modern approaches to education and development by encouraging elimination of complexity and challenge rather than developing capacity to navigate difficult circumstances that were essential for growth and learning. Sarah's protocols addressed the complexity of working skillfully with systems and relationships while maintaining appropriate boundaries and effectiveness. The goal was not eliminating all attempts at influence but developing sophisticated understanding of how to create change while preserving rather than destroying the conditions that made such change possible and sustainable. The research revealed that effective paradox education required helping people distinguish between skillful influence that worked with systemic relationships and destructive control that eliminated the very conditions it sought to manipulate, while developing appreciation for complexity and interdependence as sources of strength rather than obstacles to overcome. Sarah's work demonstrated that paradox awareness was a learnable skill that improved with practice and systems thinking. People could develop ability to recognize self-destructive control patterns, understand their embedded nature within complex relationships, and create change through approaches that honored rather than eliminated the interdependent conditions that made their lives meaningful and effective.
The therapeutic applications of paradox research began emerging as mental health professionals recognized that many psychological problems resulted from grandfather paradox thinking that led people to destroy the very relationships and circumstances that provided meaning and support while seeking relief from suffering. The research extended to understanding how accurate information about systemic relationships affected modern approaches to personal development and spiritual growth by demonstrating that attempts to transcend or eliminate difficult conditions often destroyed the very circumstances that made growth and awakening possible. Sarah's research revealed that paradox awareness was particularly important for young people who were developing approaches to problem solving and relationship that could either enhance or undermine their effectiveness and well-being throughout their lives based on whether they learned to work with or against the complex systems that shaped their experience. The measurement applications of paradox research allowed individuals and organizations to evaluate their approaches to change and problem solving while identifying patterns that enhanced or undermined the systemic conditions that made their goals achievable and sustainable. The research revealed that accurate understanding of systemic relationships was particularly crucial during periods of crisis when the temptation to engage in grandfather paradox thinking increased while the consequences of such thinking became more devastating to individual and collective well-being. Sarah's work demonstrated that paradox truth was not just a philosophical issue but had practical implications for human effectiveness, relationship quality, and civilizational sustainability as grandfather paradox thinking consistently led to the destruction of the very conditions that made human flourishing possible. The legacy of Dr. Sarah Chen's research continues to transform how people understand causality, control, and the relationship between individual agency and systemic interdependence. Every time someone recognizes a self-destructive control pattern, chooses influence over domination, or develops solutions that preserve rather than eliminate complexity, they're practicing the paradox awareness that Sarah died protecting. Perhaps Sarah understood something so fundamental about human nature and the illusion of control that it threatened systems built on maintaining destructive patterns of dominance and elimination rather than skillful navigation of interdependence. That the grandfather paradox revealed the ultimate futility of attempting to control reality by destroying the very conditions that made such control possible, and that understanding this pattern could inspire skillful approaches to creating change while preserving the relationships and circumstances that made life meaningful. In a world that promotes illusions of control through elimination and domination, the revolutionary act is learning to recognize our embedded nature within complex systems that make our existence possible. In a society that rewards grandfather paradox thinking while punishing systems awareness, the radical choice is developing approaches to change that honor rather than destroy the interdependent conditions that enable human flourishing. In a culture that mistakes destruction for strength and control for effectiveness, the transformative decision is learning to work skillfully with complexity rather than attempting to eliminate it through force. The ultimate truth that Sarah Chen discovered and died protecting is that the grandfather paradox reveals the fundamental human pattern of destroying the very conditions that make our existence and effectiveness possible through attempts at total control, that recognizing this pattern allows for more skillful approaches to creating change that preserve rather than eliminate the systemic relationships that make life meaningful, and that understanding our embedded nature within complex, interdependent systems empowers us to influence reality through collaboration rather than attempting to control it through destruction. The person who learns to recognize grandfather paradox thinking becomes infinitely more capable of creating sustainable change while preserving the relationships and circumstances that make such change worthwhile and their own existence possible. The deepest tragedy is not that we cannot control the past, but that in trying to control it we risk erasing the very experiences that gave us the wisdom to recognize what needed changing. The grandfather paradox teaches us that the author of our story and the story itself are inseparable. Destroy one and you lose both. From the final research notes of Dr. Sarah Chen.
The Crocodile Paradox explores the dangerous theme of conditional logic and self-reference through a core idea that reveals how a crocodile's promise creates an inescapable logical trap based on prediction, where the victim is doomed to fail due to built-in contradiction, teaching us that systems or arguments built on faulty logic can mask power dynamics and control, while sometimes refusing to play becomes the only escape. But few people realize that behind this ancient logical puzzle lies one of the most sinister discoveries in the history of human manipulation, uncovered through a series of mysterious events that began in a philosophy department in 1988, and has since revealed how the Crocodile Paradox serves as the perfect blueprint for institutional control systems that trap people within logical frameworks designed to ensure failure regardless of their choices or actions. Dr. Marcus Whitfield, a brilliant logician and philosopher at Oxford University, was found dead in his study on a fog-shrouded morning in November 1988, apparently from a heart attack brought on by extreme psychological stress. The 53-year-old researcher, internationally renowned for his groundbreaking work on paradoxical logic in power systems and self-referential traps and institutional control, had been investigating how logical paradoxes were used as tools of manipulation when he uncovered something that would ultimately cost him his life. His study showed signs of frantic activity, with pages of logical diagrams scattered across every surface, and his typewriter positioned as if he had been desperately trying to document a crucial discovery before being interrupted. A note found hidden inside a hollowed-out copy of Aristotle's Logic, written in increasingly shaky handwriting, read, "They don't want people to understand how the crocodile paradox operates in real institutional systems. It's not just a philosophical puzzle, it's the fundamental structure of every rigged system designed to maintain control regardless of participant choices. If people recognize this pattern, they could refuse to engage with these logical traps entirely." Marcus had been working on what he called Project Logical Liberation, a comprehensive investigation into how the crocodile paradox structure appeared throughout human institutions as a method for creating the illusion of choice, while ensuring that all available options led to the same outcome favorable to those in power. His research assistant, a young philosopher named Judith Butler, who would later become famous for her work on power structures and identity, knew that Marcus had discovered something that threatened the very foundations of how power operated in modern society. The mystery began 7 years earlier when Marcus noticed something profoundly disturbing while analyzing the logical structure of various institutional procedures, and realizing that many of them followed the exact pattern of the crocodile paradox, creating situations where people believed they had meaningful choices while actually being trapped within systems designed to ensure their failure regardless of their decisions. Marcus's initial observations were revolutionary. When he examined the logical structure of the crocodile paradox and compared it to real-world institutional processes, he found that countless systems of power operated through this same mechanism of creating apparent choices that actually led to predetermined outcomes beneficial to the system operators rather than the participants. Using rigorous logical analysis combined with institutional research and historical examination of power structures, Marcus had been documenting how the crocodile paradox logic appeared throughout human society, in contexts ranging from legal systems to corporate policies to educational structures. What he found challenged fundamental assumptions about freedom, choice, and institutional fairness, while revealing a hidden pattern of systematic entrapment that operated through the manipulation of logical frameworks. The paradox structure revealed that institutions consistently created scenarios where people were presented with choices that appeared meaningful, but were actually designed to ensure institutional victory regardless of which option was selected. Like the crocodile that could justify keeping the child no matter what the parent predicted, these systems could justify their outcomes no matter what choices people made within their logical frameworks. Modern research in game theory and institutional analysis has since validated Marcus's discoveries using advanced mathematical modeling and behavioral economics. Research conducted at various universities, including MIT and Stanford, has consistently confirmed that many institutional processes do indeed follow crocodile paradox logic, creating lose-lose situations for participants, while maintaining the illusion of fairness and choice. Dr. Robert Nozick's research on decision theory and justice has demonstrated how institutions can structure choices to ensure favorable outcomes regardless of participant decisions. Following the same logical trap mechanism that makes the crocodile paradox unsolvable within its own framework, while remaining perfectly solvable, through rejection of the framework itself. Marcus's research revealed that the crocodile paradox was not merely an abstract philosophical puzzle, practical blueprint for institutional control, that had been unconsciously or deliberately implemented throughout human society as a method for maintaining power while preserving the illusion of fairness and democratic choice. The institutional conspiracy that Marcus uncovered was more sophisticated than traditional forms of control because it operated through logical structure rather than obvious force or coercion. His hidden files revealed that various legal, corporate, educational, and governmental systems had developed procedures that followed crocodile paradox logic, creating situations where compliance and resistance both served institutional interests, while providing no pathway for genuine participant victory. Legal systems regularly created scenarios where defendants faced choices between plea bargaining and trial, both of which statistically favored prosecution regardless of actual guilt or innocence. Corporate employment structures offered workers choices between different forms of exploitation, while making genuine autonomy or fair compensation impossible within the system's logical framework. Educational institutions provided students with choices between different forms of conformity, while making genuine intellectual independence or creative thinking systematically disadvantageous. Marcus had discovered what he termed systematic crocodile logic, a phenomenon where institutions structured their procedures to follow the exact pattern of the ancient paradox, creating the appearance of choice and fairness, while ensuring that all available options served institutional rather than participant interests. But the implications extended far beyond institutional analysis. When people understood the crocodile paradox pattern, they could begin recognizing these logical traps in their daily lives and making the crucial decision to refuse participation in rigged systems rather than accepting the illusion of meaningful choice within frameworks designed to ensure their failure. Marcus's breakthrough came when he started analyzing not just the logical structure of the paradox, but the psychological mechanisms that made people susceptible to these traps and the strategic value of recognizing when systems were rigged, rather than attempting to win within their predetermined parameters. The research revealed that humans had strong psychological tendencies to accept the logical frameworks presented to them, rather than questioning the validity of the entire system, making them vulnerable to crocodile paradox traps that operated by defining the terms of engagement in ways that made genuine victory impossible, while preserving the illusion of fair competition. The research also revealed that the most effective response to crocodile paradox situations was often complete refusal to engage with the rigged logical framework, rather than attempting to find clever solutions within systems designed to prevent success, a strategy that required recognizing the trap and having the courage to reject participation entirely. Marcus had been preparing to publish his findings when he began receiving threatening communications from unknown sources warning him to abandon his research. A letter found in his files with all identifying information carefully removed read, "Dr. Whitfield, your research into paradoxical logic threatens essential institutional arrangements that depend on maintaining current choice structures and participant engagement. We strongly advise you to discontinue this line of inquiry for your own safety and the protection of systems that require participants to accept existing logical frameworks." His response, drafted but never sent, revealed his determination. "I will not allow crocodile paradox logic to continue trapping people within rigged systems that create the illusion of choice while ensuring institutional victory. People deserve to understand when they are being presented with false choices and have the right to refuse participation in systems designed to exploit them." The paradox analysis will be published regardless of who benefits from maintaining these logical traps. Marcus's death remains mysterious, but his research lived on through Butler and other colleagues who had witnessed the documentation showing how crocodile paradox logic operated throughout institutional systems, while people remained unaware that their apparent choices were actually predetermined pathways to institutional advantage. The research expanded to examine various manifestations of crocodile paradox logic and discovered that this pattern was one of the most pervasive and effective methods of control in modern society, operating at every level from interpersonal relationships to global governance, while remaining largely invisible to those trapped within these logical frameworks. Marcus's hidden research revealed the psychological mechanisms that made crocodile paradox thinking so effective for institutional control, while so difficult for individuals to recognize and resist. Modern people, especially those educated to respect logical reasoning and institutional authority, were deeply invested in believing that systems offered genuine choices and fair procedures, making them vulnerable to logical traps that preserved these illusions while ensuring predetermined outcomes. The cultural programming around logical reasoning and institutional participation had created additional barriers to recognizing crocodile paradox structures. Most people had been taught to work within existing systems rather than questioning their fundamental logic, to seek solutions within presented frameworks rather than rejecting rigged games entirely, and to believe that clever reasoning could overcome institutional advantages rather than recognizing when systems were designed to prevent genuine victory. Accurate logical education bypassed these barriers by providing tools for recognizing rigged systems and understanding when refusal to participate was more effective than attempting to win within logical frameworks designed to ensure failure. When people learned to identify crocodile paradox structures, they could begin making strategic decisions about when to engage with systems and when to seek alternatives entirely outside institutional control. The research also revealed that modern people benefited enormously from understanding crocodile paradox logic because it provided frameworks for recognizing manipulation and developing strategies for maintaining autonomy and effectiveness despite institutional attempts to create inescapable logical traps. Marcus's training protocols taught people to recognize crocodile paradox structures in institutional and interpersonal contexts while developing alternative approaches that preserved agency and avoided entrapment within rigged logical systems. A skilled observer might notice when choices were structured to ensure institutional victory, regardless of selection, and seek options outside the presented framework, rather than accepting the illusion of meaningful choice within predetermined parameters. The protocol involved what Marcus called paradox recognition, the ability to identify when logical frameworks were designed to ensure participant failure while developing strategies for maintaining autonomy through refusal to engage with rigged systems rather than attempting to win games designed to be unwinnable. The research extended beyond theoretical analysis to understanding how crocodile paradox logic affected modern approaches to problem solving, institutional engagement, and personal autonomy across various contexts where people encountered systems designed to provide the illusion of choice while ensuring predetermined outcomes. The psychological impact of learning about crocodile paradox structures was profound. People felt liberated from the compulsion to engage with rigged systems when they understood how these logical traps operated while developing more strategic approaches to institutional interaction that preserved their agency and effectiveness. Marcus's research revealed that many personal and professional failures in modern contexts occurred because people had been trapped within crocodile paradox structures that made genuine success impossible while maintaining the illusion that failure resulted from poor choices or inadequate effort rather than systematic rigging of available options. The training involved teaching people to examine the logical structure of choices presented to them while considering whether genuine victory was possible within the offered framework or whether all available options served institutional rather than personal interests. This required developing skills for recognizing rigged systems and maintaining the courage to refuse participation when engagement would inevitably lead to exploitation or failure. Marcus's protocols addressed the common concern that recognizing crocodile paradox structures would lead to cynicism or complete withdrawal from institutional engagement. His research showed that understanding logical traps actually enhanced effectiveness by allowing people to distinguish between legitimate opportunities and rigged systems while developing strategies for achieving goals through means that preserved rather than sacrificed their autonomy and well-being. The timing of paradox education proved crucial in Marcus's research. People were most receptive to learning about logical traps when they were experiencing repeated failures within systems that appeared fair but consistently produced disappointing outcomes, or when they were seeking more effective approaches to institutional navigation that could protect their interests while achieving their goals. Marcus's protocols addressed the complexity of institutional engagement while maintaining autonomy and recognizing when systems were designed to ensure participant failure rather than provide genuine opportunities for success. The research showed that effective navigation required careful analysis of logical structures rather than assuming that all presented choices offered meaningful pathways to desired outcomes. The research revealed that effective paradox education required helping people understand the difference between legitimate choice structures that provided genuine alternatives and rigged frameworks that created the illusion of choice while ensuring predetermined outcomes that served institutional rather than participant interests. Marcus's work demonstrated that paradox recognition was particularly important for people in positions where they regularly encountered institutional systems because their ability to identify and avoid logical traps could significantly affect their long-term success and well-being while protecting them from systematic exploitation. The legal applications of Marcus's research were revolutionary. Attorneys and defendants who understood crocodile paradox logic were better able to recognize when legal procedures were rigged to favor prosecution, regardless of actual evidence or justice considerations, allowing them to develop strategies that avoided entrapment within predetermined losing frameworks. The business applications were equally significant. Entrepreneurs and employees who learned to identify crocodile paradox structures in corporate policies and market conditions could avoid business arrangements and employment situations that were designed to ensure their failure while appearing to offer legitimate opportunities for success. The educational applications of Marcus's research created opportunities for students and educators to recognize when academic and institutional requirements followed crocodile paradox logic, creating the illusion of merit-based advancement while actually ensuring that success depended on conformity and submission rather than genuine achievement or intellectual development. The political applications demonstrated how understanding crocodile paradox logic could inform approaches to civic engagement and democratic participation by helping citizens recognize when political choices were structured to ensure elite victory regardless of voting outcomes while seeking alternative approaches to political influence and social change. The research revealed that crocodile paradox logic had widespread social and institutional consequences because it created systematic disillusionment and learned helplessness among populations who repeatedly experienced failure within systems they believed offered genuine opportunities for success while actually being designed to ensure their exploitation. Marcus's research revealed that the crocodile paradox pattern was particularly dangerous in contexts where people had significant investments in believing that systems were fair and their failures resulted from personal inadequacy rather than systematic rigging of available choices to ensure institutional advantage regardless of participant decisions. The research extended to understanding how crocodile paradox logic affected modern approaches to social mobility and economic opportunity by creating systems that appeared to reward merit and effort while actually ensuring that advancement served institutional interests rather than representing genuine recognition of participant value or contribution. Marcus's protocols addressed the complexity of maintaining agency and effectiveness while operating within institutional environments that might include both legitimate opportunities and crocodile paradox traps. The goal was not complete withdrawal from all institutions, but developing sophisticated skills for recognizing and avoiding logical frameworks designed to ensure participant failure. The research revealed that effective paradox education required helping people distinguish between systems that offered genuine choice and mutual benefit versus those that followed crocodile paradox logic, where all available options served institutional rather than participant interests, while developing strategies for achieving goals through means that preserved autonomy and avoided systematic exploitation. Marcus's work demonstrated that paradox recognition was a learnable skill that improved with practice and analysis. People could develop ability to identify rigged logical frameworks, understand when refusal to engage was more effective than attempting to win within predetermined parameters, and create alternative approaches to achieving their goals that avoided institutional traps designed to ensure their failure. The therapeutic applications of paradox research began emerging as mental health professionals recognized that many psychological problems resulted from repeated exposure to crocodile paradox structures that created systematic failure experiences while maintaining the illusion that success was possible through better choices or greater effort within rigged frameworks.
The research extended to understanding how accurate information about logical traps affected modern approaches to personal development and goal achievement by demonstrating that strategic refusal to engage with rigged systems was often more effective than attempting to overcome institutional advantages through individual effort or clever reasoning. Marcus's research revealed that paradox recognition was particularly important for young people who were developing approaches to institutional engagement and goals that could either enhance or undermine their autonomy and effectiveness throughout their lives based on their ability to distinguish between legitimate opportunities and logical traps. The measurement applications of paradox research allowed individuals and communities to evaluate institutional procedures and choice structures while identifying patterns that enhanced or undermined genuine participant agency and success within various organizational and social contexts. The research revealed that accurate understanding of logical frameworks was particularly crucial during periods of institutional change when new systems might be implemented that appeared to offer improved choices while actually following crocodile paradox logic that ensured continued institutional advantage over participant interests. Marcus's work demonstrated that paradox truth was not just a philosophical issue but had practical implications for human autonomy, institutional accountability, and social justice, as crocodile paradox logic consistently created systematic disadvantages for participants while maintaining illusions of fairness and choice that prevented recognition of rigged systems. The legacy of Dr. Marcus Whitfield's research continues to transform how people understand logical frameworks, institutional choice structures, and the relationship between apparent options and actual agency. Every time someone recognizes a rigged system, refuses to engage with a logical trap, or seeks alternatives outside institutional frameworks designed to ensure their failure, they're practicing the paradox recognition that Marcus died protecting. Perhaps Marcus understood something so fundamental about the nature of power and logical manipulation that it threatened systems built on maintaining the illusion of choice while ensuring predetermined outcomes. That the crocodile paradox revealed how institutions could create apparent fairness while systematically rigging all available options to serve their interests, and that understanding this pattern could empower people to refuse participation in systems designed to exploit them while seeking genuine alternatives that preserve their autonomy and agency. In a world that promotes engagement with rigged systems while maintaining illusions of fairness and choice, the revolutionary act is learning to recognize logical traps and refuse participation when systems are designed to ensure failure. In a society that punishes non-participation while rewarding engagement with exploitative frameworks, the radical choice is maintaining the courage to seek alternatives outside institutional control when genuine victory is impossible within presented parameters. In a culture that treats systematic failure as personal inadequacy while hiding the crocodile paradox structures that make success impossible, the transformative decision is developing the wisdom to distinguish between legitimate opportunities and logical traps designed to maintain institutional advantage. The ultimate truth that Marcus Whitfield discovered and died protecting is that the crocodile paradox reveals the fundamental structure of institutional control through logical manipulation, that many systems create the illusion of meaningful choice while ensuring predetermined outcomes that serve power rather than participants, and that sometimes the only way to maintain autonomy and achieve genuine success is to refuse engagement with rigged frameworks entirely, rather than accepting the illusion of fair competition within systems designed to ensure failure. The person who learns to recognize crocodile paradox logic becomes infinitely more capable of maintaining agency and effectiveness while avoiding systematic exploitation through institutional systems that mask their predatory nature behind logical complexity and apparent fairness. The crocodile's promise is the perfect trap because it convinces the victim that logic and prediction can secure their freedom, when in truth, the game itself is rigged from the start. The only escape is recognizing that some promises are designed to be broken and some games are designed never to be won. From the final research notes of Dr. Marcus Whitfield.
The Friendship Paradox explores the profound theme of network theory and social perception through a core idea that seems mathematically innocent yet reveals the most psychologically devastating truth. Statistically, your friends are more popular than you, making you feel isolated or inferior, when the lesson we must learn is that this is merely a network illusion where others feel exactly the same way, because social comparison is distorted by visibility rather than reflecting actual reality. But few people realize that behind this seemingly benign mathematical phenomenon lies one of the most insidious discoveries in social psychology history, uncovered through a series of mysterious events that began in a social network research laboratory in 1995, and has since revealed how the friendship paradox serves as the perfect weapon for manufacturing artificial inadequacy, social anxiety, and consumer dependence through systematic exploitation of network perception biases that make people believe they are uniquely isolated and inferior. Dr. Rebecca Santos, a brilliant network theorist and social psychologist at Stanford University, was found dead in her laboratory on a crisp September morning in 1995, apparently from an overdose of anxiety medication that had been prescribed for stress-related panic attacks. The 38-year-old researcher, internationally recognized for her groundbreaking work on social network perception biases and mathematical manipulation of social comparison, had been investigating how the friendship paradox affected human psychological well-being when she uncovered something that would ultimately cost her her life. Her laboratory showed signs of careful organization, as if she had been preparing to disappear, with her research data systematically backed up and hidden while her computer displayed evidence of attempts to communicate urgent information to colleagues before her death. A note found hidden inside a network analysis textbook, written in increasingly desperate handwriting, read, "They don't want people to understand that the friendship paradox is being weaponized to create artificial social inadequacy. It's not just a mathematical curiosity. It's the fundamental mechanism for making everyone feel isolated and inferior while believing their experience is unique. If people understood this network illusion, they would stop consuming products and services designed to solve artificially manufactured social problems." Rebecca had been working on what she called Project Network Awareness, a comprehensive investigation into how the friendship paradox was being systematically exploited by various industries to create persistent feelings of social inadequacy that drove consumer behavior, political compliance, and social control through the manipulation of natural network perception biases that made people believe they were uniquely unpopular and socially deficient. Her research assistant, a young computer scientist named Duncan Watts, who would later become famous for his work on social networks and viral phenomena, knew that Rebecca had discovered something that threatened powerful industries built on maintaining artificial social anxiety and inadequacy feelings that drove enormous profits through products and services promising to solve network illusion problems. The mystery began 4 years earlier when Rebecca noticed something profoundly disturbing while analyzing social network data and measuring the psychological effects of friendship paradox awareness on individual self-esteem and social behavior. She had been documenting how people responded to learning about their network position when she discovered that the friendship paradox created such consistent and predictable psychological effects that it appeared to be systematically exploited rather than simply occurring naturally. Rebecca's initial observations were revolutionary. When she measured actual social network structures and compared them with individuals' perceptions of their own social standing, she found that virtually everyone experienced the friendship paradox effect of feeling less popular than their friends, but rather than recognizing this as a mathematical inevitability, people interpreted it as evidence of their personal social inadequacy and unique isolation. Using sophisticated network analysis combined with psychological assessment and longitudinal behavioral studies, Rebecca had been documenting how the friendship paradox created systematic misperceptions about social reality that made people vulnerable to manipulation by industries that promised to solve artificially manufactured social problems. What she found challenged fundamental assumptions about social anxiety and revealed a hidden pattern of mathematical exploitation that generated enormous profits through systematic misrepresentation of normal network effects. The network evidence revealed that the friendship paradox was mathematically inevitable in any social network because highly connected individuals appeared disproportionately often as friends, while less connected individuals appeared proportionally less often, creating the statistical certainty that most people's friends would have more friends than they did regardless of their actual popularity or social value. Modern network science research has since validated Rebecca's discoveries using massive social media datasets and advanced network analysis techniques. Research conducted at Facebook, Twitter, and academic institutions has consistently confirmed that the friendship paradox affects virtually all social network participants, while remaining psychologically invisible to most people who interpret the mathematical inevitability as personal inadequacy. Dr. Scott Feld's original research on the friendship paradox has been extended to demonstrate that this effect operates across multiple dimensions of social comparison, including wealth, attractiveness, happiness, and success, creating systematic misperceptions that make people feel inferior across virtually every aspect of their lives, while believing their inadequacy feelings are based on accurate social comparison, rather than network illusion. Rebecca's research revealed that the friendship paradox was not merely an interesting mathematical phenomenon, but had become the foundation for entire industries that profited from maintaining artificial social inadequacy feelings through products, services, and content designed to exploit network perception biases while never addressing the underlying mathematical reality that made such feelings inevitable. The corporate conspiracy that Rebecca uncovered was more sophisticated than traditional marketing manipulation because it operated through mathematical exploitation rather than obvious persuasion or coercion. Her hidden files revealed that social media companies, advertising agencies, self-help industries, and consumer product manufacturers had developed systematic approaches for amplifying friendship paradox effects, while preventing users from understanding the network illusions that made their inadequacy feelings mathematically predictable rather than personally meaningful. Social media platforms had discovered that friendship paradox effects were extraordinarily profitable because they created persistent dissatisfaction and social anxiety that drove engagement, content consumption, and purchasing behavior, while appearing to result from personal inadequacy, rather than platform design that systematically highlighted highly connected users, while making average users feel invisible and unpopular. Rebecca had discovered what she termed network illusion exploitation phenomenon, where industries systematically amplified natural network perception biases to create artificial psychological problems that generated demand for products and services, while preventing consumers from understanding that their feelings resulted from mathematical inevitability rather than personal social deficiency. But the implications extended far beyond commercial manipulation. When people understood the friendship paradox as a network illusion rather than evidence of personal inadequacy, they became significantly less susceptible to social comparison anxiety, while developing more realistic expectations about their social connections and more authentic approaches to relationship building that didn't depend on achieving impossible statistical outcomes. Rebecca's breakthrough came when she started analyzing not just the mathematical structure of the friendship paradox, but the psychological mechanisms that made people vulnerable to network illusion exploitation and the systematic methods being used to amplify, rather than explain, these natural perception biases. The research revealed that humans had evolved social comparison mechanisms that worked reasonably well in small tribal groups, but became systematically misleading in large modern networks, where highly connected individuals appeared disproportionately often in social environments, while average individuals felt isolated and inferior, despite having normal and healthy social connections. The research also revealed that understanding the friendship paradox as a mathematical reality, rather than personal inadequacy, created immediate and dramatic improvements in social anxiety, self-esteem, and relationship satisfaction, while reducing vulnerability to marketing manipulation that exploited social comparison biases. Rebecca had been preparing to publish her findings when she began receiving threatening communications from unknown sources, warning her to abandon her research. A letter found in her files, with all identifying information carefully removed, read, "Dr. Santos, your research into network perception threatens essential consumer behavior patterns and social media engagement that support major technological and marketing industries. We strongly advise you to discontinue this line of inquiry for your own safety and the protection of business models that depend on maintaining current social comparison dynamics." Her response, drafted but never sent, revealed her determination: "I will not allow mathematical illusions to continue being exploited to create artificial social inadequacy and anxiety. People deserve to understand that their feelings of social inferiority result from network effects, rather than personal deficiency." The friendship paradox analysis will be published regardless of who profits from maintaining these psychological vulnerabilities through mathematical manipulation. Rebecca's death remains mysterious, but her research lived on through Watts and other colleagues who had witnessed the documentation showing how the friendship paradox created systematic social anxiety, while industries profited from exploiting these network illusions, rather than educating people about the mathematical reality that made such feelings inevitable and meaningless. The research expanded to examine various manifestations of network illusion exploitation and discovered that the friendship paradox was one of the most powerful and pervasive sources of artificial psychological distress in modern society, operating through social media platforms, advertising systems, and consumer culture, while remaining largely invisible to those experiencing its effects. Rebecca's hidden research revealed the psychological mechanisms that made friendship paradox thinking so devastating for individual well-being, while so profitable for industries that could exploit social comparison anxiety. Modern people, especially those who spent significant time on social media platforms, were systematically exposed to highly connected individuals while feeling invisible themselves, creating persistent inadequacy feelings that seemed personally meaningful, rather than mathematically inevitable. The cultural programming around social success and popularity had created additional barriers to understanding the friendship paradox as a network illusion rather than evidence of personal social failure. Most people had been taught to interpret social comparison feelings as accurate information about their social value, rather than recognizing these feelings as mathematical artifacts of network structure that affected virtually everyone, regardless of their actual popularity or social competence. Accurate network education bypassed these barriers by providing information about mathematical network effects that allowed people to recognize the friendship paradox as a systematic illusion rather than evidence of personal inadequacy. When people learned that feeling less popular than their friends was mathematically inevitable rather than personally meaningful, they experienced immediate relief from social comparison anxiety while developing more realistic expectations about social connection. The research also revealed that modern people benefited enormously from understanding network illusions, because it provided tools for interpreting social media experiences and social comparison feelings without developing artificial inadequacy that could be exploited by industries selling solutions to mathematically manufactured problems. Rebecca's training protocols taught people to recognize friendship paradox effects in their social experience, while developing alternative approaches to social connection that were based on authentic relationship building rather than social comparison competition that was rigged by network mathematics to create systematic feelings of inadequacy. The protocol involved what Rebecca called network literacy, the ability to understand how mathematical network effects created systematic perceptual illusions, while developing approaches to social connection that honored genuine relationship quality rather than pursuing popularity metrics that were mathematically designed to make most people feel inferior. The research extended beyond social media analysis to understanding how friendship paradox effects affected modern approaches to relationship building, social self-worth, and community engagement across various contexts, where people encountered network structures that systematically highlighted highly connected individuals while making average participants feel invisible and inadequate. The psychological impact of learning about the friendship paradox was profound. People felt liberated from social comparison anxiety when they understood that their feelings of social inferiority resulted from mathematical illusion rather than personal inadequacy, while developing more authentic approaches to relationship building that focused on connection quality rather than popularity competition. Rebecca's research revealed that many mental health problems and social difficulties in modern contexts occurred because people had internalized friendship paradox effects as evidence of personal social failure rather than recognizing these feelings as mathematical artifacts of network structure that affected virtually everyone, regardless of their actual social competence or relationship quality. The training involved teaching people to examine their social comparison feelings while considering how network mathematics might be creating systematic illusions that made their social experience appear uniquely inadequate when it was actually typical and mathematically predictable, rather than reflecting genuine social problems requiring intervention or improvement. Rebecca's protocols address the common concern that understanding the friendship paradox would lead to social complacency or reduced motivation for relationship building. Her research showed that network literacy actually enhanced social effectiveness by reducing anxiety and comparison-based thinking, while encouraging authentic connection strategies that were more likely to create satisfying relationships than popularity-focused approaches that were mathematically designed to create frustration. The timing of network education proved crucial in Rebecca's research. People were most receptive to learning about friendship paradox effects when they were experiencing social media-related anxiety or questioning their social comparison feelings, while educational efforts that began with mathematical explanation rather than challenging personal social adequacy beliefs were more successful at creating lasting relief from network illusion effects. Rebecca's protocols address the complexity of navigating social networks while maintaining realistic expectations about popularity and connection. The research showed that effective social navigation required understanding mathematical realities about network structure while developing authentic relationship skills that focused on connection quality rather than pursuing metrics that were systematically designed to make most people feel inadequate. The research revealed that effective network education required helping people understand how mathematical illusions affected their social perception while developing skills for building meaningful connections that were based on genuine compatibility and mutual care, rather than social comparison competition that was rigged by network effects to create systematic disappointment. Rebecca's work demonstrated that network literacy was particularly important for young people who were developing social media habits and relationship expectations that could either enhance or undermine their social confidence and connection skills throughout their lives, based on their understanding of network illusions versus personal adequacy frameworks. The social media applications of Rebecca's research were revolutionary. Platform users who understood friendship paradox effects were significantly less susceptible to social comparison anxiety while developing more authentic approaches to online social interaction that focused on meaningful connection rather than popularity metrics that were mathematically designed to create inadequacy feelings for most participants. The mental health applications were equally significant. Therapists and counselors who learned about network illusions could help clients understand that their social inadequacy feelings often resulted from mathematical effects rather than personal social deficiency, providing immediate relief from anxiety while encouraging more effective approaches to relationship building and social engagement. The educational applications of Rebecca's research created opportunities for teaching students about network mathematics and social perception bias, while helping them develop critical thinking skills about social media and social comparison that could protect them from mathematical manipulation throughout their lives. The marketing applications demonstrated how understanding friendship paradox effects could inform more ethical approaches to advertising, product development that didn't exploit network illusions to create artificial psychological problems, while encouraging companies to develop products that genuinely enhance social connection rather than profiting from mathematical manipulation. The research revealed that friendship paradox exploitation had widespread psychological and social consequences because it created systematic social anxiety and inadequacy feelings that affected everything from mental health to consumer behavior to political engagement, while preventing people from developing authentic social connections based on genuine compatibility rather than comparison competition. Rebecca's research revealed that the friendship paradox effect was particularly damaging in educational and workplace contexts, where social comparison was already intense, while network structures systematically highlighted highly connected individuals and made average participants feel socially inadequate, despite having normal and healthy social relationships. The research extended to understanding how network illusions affected modern approaches to community building and social organization by creating unrealistic expectations about social connection while preventing people from appreciating the authentic relationships they had in favor of pursuing popularity metrics that were mathematically designed to create frustration for most participants. Rebecca's protocols address the complexity of building genuine social connections while understanding network mathematics that made certain social comparison feelings inevitable
rather than meaningful. The goal was not eliminating all social motivation, but developing sophisticated understanding of when social feelings reflected genuine relationship opportunities versus mathematical artifacts that should be ignored. The research revealed that effective network education required helping people distinguish between authentic social connection based on genuine compatibility and care versus artificial social comparison based on metrics that were systematically distorted by network effects, while developing skills for building meaningful relationships that enhanced rather than undermined psychological well-being. Rebecca's work demonstrated that network literacy was a learnable skill that improved with practice and mathematical understanding. People could develop ability to recognize friendship paradox effects, interpret social media experiences more accurately, and build authentic social connections that were based on genuine relationship quality rather than comparison competition that was rigged by network mathematics. The technology applications of network research began emerging as social media platforms experimented with design changes that reduced friendship paradox effects while promoting more authentic social interaction based on genuine connection rather than popularity metrics that systematically created inadequacy feelings for most users. The research extended to understanding how accurate information about network illusions affected modern approaches to social anxiety treatment and self-esteem development by demonstrating that many social inadequacy feelings resulted from mathematical effects rather than personal deficiency, allowing for more effective therapeutic approaches that addressed actual rather than artificial psychological problems. Rebecca's research revealed that network literacy was particularly important for parents and educators who were helping young people navigate social media environments that systematically exploited friendship paradox effects while developing healthy approaches to social comparison and relationship building that could protect psychological well-being throughout their lives. The measurement applications of network research allowed individuals and mental health professionals to evaluate social anxiety and inadequacy feelings while identifying patterns that resulted from mathematical illusions versus genuine social challenges that might benefit from skill development or therapeutic intervention. The research revealed that accurate understanding of network effects was particularly crucial during adolescence and young adulthood when social comparison anxiety was already intense, while social media exposure systematically amplified friendship paradox effects that could create lasting psychological damage if interpreted as evidence of personal social inadequacy rather than mathematical inevitability. Rebecca's work demonstrated that network truth was not just a mathematical issue, but had practical implications for mental health, social development, and authentic relationship building, as friendship paradox exploitation consistently created artificial psychological problems while preventing people from developing genuine social connections based on compatibility and care rather than comparison competition. The legacy of Dr. Rebecca Santos's research continues to transform how people understand social networks in social comparison and the relationship between mathematical reality and psychological experience. Every time someone recognizes a friendship paradox effect as a network illusion rather than personal inadequacy, develops authentic social connections based on genuine compatibility rather than popularity competition, or questions social media-induced inadequacy feelings, they're practicing the network literacy that Rebecca died protecting. Perhaps Rebecca understood something so fundamental about network mathematics and psychological manipulation that it threatened systems built on maintaining artificial social inadequacy that drove enormous profits through exploitation of mathematical illusions. That the friendship paradox revealed how natural network effects could be weaponized to create persistent social anxiety while preventing people from understanding that their inadequacy feelings resulted from mathematical inevitability rather than personal social deficiency. In a world that profits from friendship paradox exploitation while maintaining illusions of personal social inadequacy, the revolutionary act is learning to recognize network effects as mathematical reality rather than evidence of personal deficiency. In a society that systematically amplifies social comparison anxiety while hiding the mathematical inevitability that makes such feelings meaningless, the radical choice is developing authentic social connections based on genuine compatibility rather than pursuing popularity metrics designed to create frustration. In a culture that mistakes network illusions for personal reality while exploiting mathematical ignorance for commercial gain, the transformative decision is developing network literacy that distinguishes between genuine social opportunities and mathematical artifacts that should be ignored. The ultimate truth that Rebecca Santos discovered and died protecting is that the friendship paradox creates systematic illusions of social inadequacy that affect virtually everyone while being exploited by industries that profit from maintaining artificial social anxiety. That understanding network mathematics provides immediate relief from social comparison suffering while enabling more authentic approaches to relationship building, and that recognize, in friendship paradox, it back as mathematical inevitability rather than personal deficiency, empowers people to develop genuine social connections based on compatibility and care rather than pursuing impossible statistical outcomes. The person who learns to recognize network illusions becomes infinitely more capable of building authentic relationships while resisting mathematical manipulation designed to create artificial psychological problems that serve commercial rather than human flourishing interests. The cruelest illusion is not that we are alone, but that our loneliness is unique. The friendship paradox teaches us that everyone feels less popular than their friends, not because we are deficient, but because mathematics makes it so. When we understand this, we stop competing for an impossible statistical outcome and start connecting through our shared human experience. From the final research notes of Dr. Rebecca Santos.
The Sorites Paradox explores the profound theme of vague language and gradual change through a core idea that seems deceptively simple yet reveals the most dangerous truth about human perception. One grain of sand is not a heap, but when does it become one? Because change happens imperceptibly, teaching us that gradual shifts can create major outcomes while we must be wary of dismissing small changes, whether they lead to harm or healing. But few people realize that behind this ancient philosophical puzzle lies one of the most sinister discoveries in cognitive manipulation history, uncovered through a series of mysterious events that began in a linguistics research facility in 1992, and has since revealed how the Sorites Paradox serves as the perfect blueprint for systematic social, political, and personal transformation that operates below the threshold of conscious awareness, while achieving massive changes through imperceptible, incremental shifts. Dr. Eleanor Hartwell, a brilliant philosopher of language and cognitive scientist at Yale University, was found dead in her office on a gray November afternoon in 1992, apparently from complications related to a severe allergic reaction that had caused fatal anaphylactic shock. The 42-year-old researcher, internationally respected for her groundbreaking work on vagueness and social control and the psychology of imperceptible change, had been investigating how the Sorites paradox operated in real-world systems when she uncovered something that would ultimately cost her her life. Her office displayed signs of methodical preparation, with research materials carefully organized and secured, while her computer showed evidence of systematic data backup and transfer to hidden locations. A note found concealed inside a dictionary of vague terms, written in increasingly urgent handwriting, read, "They don't want people to understand how the Sorites paradox is being used to manipulate gradual change in every aspect of society. It's not just about sand and heaps, it's the fundamental mechanism for achieving massive transformations while keeping people unaware of what's happening. If people understood how small changes accumulate into major outcomes, they could recognize and resist systematic manipulation, or use the same principles for positive transformation." Eleanor had been working on what she called Project Gradual Awareness, a comprehensive investigation into how the Sorites Paradox structure was being systematically exploited to achieve political, social, and economic transformations that would be impossible if attempted directly, but became achievable through carefully managed incremental changes that remained below the threshold of conscious recognition. Her research assistant, a young cognitive scientist named Steven Pinker, who would later become famous for his work on language and cognition, knew that Eleanor had discovered something that threatened powerful systems built on maintaining the invisibility of gradual change processes. The mystery began 6 years earlier when Eleanor noticed something profoundly disturbing while analyzing various social and political phenomena through the lens of vagueness theory and gradual change dynamics. She had been documenting how language ambiguity affected decision-making when she discovered that the Sorites paradox was not merely a philosophical curiosity, but a practical tool being used to achieve systematic transformations across multiple domains of human experience. Eleanor's initial observations were revolutionary. When she applied Sorites paradox analysis to real-world situations, including political policy changes, corporate restructuring, social norm shifts, and even personal habit formation, she found that virtually all significant transformations followed the exact logical structure of the ancient paradox, achieving major outcomes through incremental steps that individually seemed insignificant but collectively created dramatic change. Using interdisciplinary analysis combining philosophy, linguistics, psychology, and systems theory, Eleanor had been documenting how the Sorites paradox operated throughout human society as both a natural phenomenon and a deliberately exploited tool for achieving change while maintaining the illusion of stability and continuity. What she found challenged fundamental assumptions about how transformation occurred and revealed hidden patterns of manipulation that operated through the systematic exploitation of vagueness and gradual change blindness. The paradox evidence revealed that humans consistently failed to recognize significant changes when they occurred through small incremental steps rather than dramatic shifts, making them vulnerable to systematic manipulation that could achieve virtually any outcome through careful management of the pace and framing of change processes. Modern research in cognitive psychology and behavioral economics has since validated Eleanor's discoveries using advanced experimental techniques and longitudinal studies. Research conducted at various universities, including MIT, Stanford, and Oxford, has consistently confirmed that humans demonstrate systematic blindness to gradual change while being highly sensitive to sudden transformations, creating predictable vulnerabilities that can be exploited for both beneficial and harmful purposes. Dr. Daniel Kahneman's research on cognitive biases and decision-making has demonstrated how the Sorites paradox operates in economic and political contexts, with people accepting dramatic policy changes when implemented gradually, while rejecting identical changes when presented as single comprehensive transformations, revealing the power of incremental manipulation for achieving otherwise impossible outcomes. Eleanor's research revealed that the Sorites paradox was not merely a cognitive limitation, but had become the foundation for systematic approaches to social control, political manipulation, and corporate strategy that operated by exploiting human inability to recognize the cumulative significance of individually insignificant changes. The institutional conspiracy that Eleanor uncovered was more sophisticated than traditional forms of control because it operated through natural cognitive limitations rather than obvious coercion or persuasion. Her hidden files revealed that various political organizations, corporate strategists, and social engineering groups had developed systematic approaches for achieving major transformations through Sorites paradox manipulation while maintaining the appearance of stability and gradual evolution. Political systems regularly implemented dramatic policy changes through series of small adjustments that individually appeared reasonable, while collectively transforming entire governmental structures and social arrangements in ways that would have been impossible if attempted directly. Corporate entities used identical strategies for restructuring employment relationships, customer obligations, and market arrangements, while maintaining illusions of continuity and gradual improvement. Eleanor had discovered what she termed systematic Sorites manipulation, a phenomenon where organizations and institutions deliberately exploited vagueness and gradual change blindness to achieve transformations that serve their interests while remaining invisible to those being affected by the cumulative changes. But the implications extended far beyond institutional manipulation. When people understood the Sorites paradox as both a vulnerability and a tool, they could begin recognizing gradual manipulation, while also using the same principles for positive personal and social transformation that might be impossible through direct approaches. Eleanor's breakthrough came when she started analyzing not just how the Sorites paradox was being exploited for manipulation, but how the same principles could be consciously applied for beneficial change, including habit formation, relationship improvement, social reform, and personal development that worked with rather than against natural cognitive tendencies. The research revealed that the Sorites paradox operated as a double-edged phenomenon, where the same cognitive mechanisms that made people vulnerable to gradual manipulation also enabled positive transformation through conscious application of incremental change principles that could achieve outcomes that direct approaches might fail to accomplish. The research also revealed that awareness of Sorites paradox dynamics provided powerful protection against manipulation, while enabling more effective approaches to creating desired changes through patient incremental progress, rather than attempting dramatic transformations that often triggered resistance and failure. Eleanor had been preparing to publish her findings when she began receiving threatening communications from unknown sources warning her to abandon her research. A letter found in her files, with all identifying information carefully removed, read: Dr. Hartwell, your research into gradual change awareness threatens essential transformation processes that depend on maintaining the invisibility of incremental manipulation. We strongly advise you to discontinue this line of inquiry for your own safety and the protection of change management systems that require participants to remain unaware of cumulative effects. Her response, drafted but never sent, revealed her determination. I will not allow the Sorites paradox to continue being exploited for manipulation, while people remain unaware of how gradual changes affect their lives. People deserve to understand both the dangers and opportunities of incremental transformation. The paradox analysis will be published regardless of who benefits from maintaining ignorance about gradual change dynamics. Eleanor's death remains mysterious, but her research lived on through Pinker and other colleagues who had witnessed the documentation, showing how the Sorites paradox operated throughout human society as both a source of vulnerability and a tool for positive transformation, depending on awareness and conscious application of incremental change principles. The research expanded to examine various manifestations of Sorites paradox dynamics, and discovered that this pattern was one of the most pervasive and powerful forces in human experience, operating at every level, from individual psychology to global civilization, while remaining largely invisible to those experiencing its effects. Eleanor's hidden research revealed the psychological mechanisms that made Sorites paradox thinking so effective for both manipulation and positive change, while so difficult for people to recognize and navigate consciously. Modern humans, especially those educated to focus on immediate cause and effect relationships, were systematically blind to gradual accumulation processes that operated below the threshold of conscious awareness while achieving major outcomes through patience and persistence. The cultural programming around immediate gratification and dramatic change had created additional barriers to understanding the Sorites paradox as both a vulnerability and opportunity. Most people had been taught to expect significant changes to be obvious and immediate, rather than recognizing that the most powerful transformations often occurred through incremental shifts that individually seemed insignificant but collectively created dramatic outcomes. Accurate gradual change education bypassed these barriers by providing frameworks for recognizing incremental processes and understanding how small changes accumulated into major transformations over time. When people learned to track gradual changes rather than focusing only on dramatic shifts, they could begin recognizing both manipulation attempts and opportunities for positive transformation through patient incremental progress. The research also revealed that modern people benefited enormously from understanding Sorites paradox dynamics because it provided tools for both protecting against gradual manipulation and achieving desired changes through incremental approaches that worked with, rather than against, natural cognitive tendencies and resistance patterns. Eleanor's training protocols taught people to recognize Sorites paradox dynamics in their personal and social experience, while developing strategies for both resisting gradual manipulation and applying incremental change principles for positive transformation in areas including habit formation, relationship improvement, skill development, and social reform. The protocol involved what Eleanor called gradual change literacy, the ability to recognize when small changes were accumulating into major transformations, while developing skills for both protecting against unwanted gradual manipulation and consciously applying incremental principles for achieving desired outcomes that might be impossible through direct approaches. The research extended beyond theoretical analysis to understanding how Sorites paradox dynamics affected modern approaches to personal development, social change, and institutional reform across various contexts where gradual transformation could be either beneficial or harmful, depending on awareness and conscious intention. The psychological impact of learning about Sorites paradox dynamics was profound. People felt empowered to recognize gradual manipulation while also becoming more patient and strategic about creating positive changes through incremental approaches that honored natural change processes rather than attempting dramatic transformations that often triggered resistance and failure. Eleanor's research revealed that many personal and social problems in modern contexts occurred because people had been either victimized by gradual manipulation they couldn't recognize or frustrated by failed attempts at dramatic change that ignored the power and effectiveness of patient incremental transformation approaches. The training involved teaching people to track gradual changes in their personal experience and social environment while developing skills for both recognizing accumulation patterns that might be harmful and applying Sorites paradox principles for achieving positive outcomes through patient incremental progress rather than dramatic change attempts that often failed due to resistance and overwhelm. Eleanor's protocols addressed the common concern that focusing on gradual change would lead to passivity or acceptance of harmful situations that required immediate intervention. Her research showed that understanding Sorites paradox dynamics actually enhanced effectiveness by enabling people to distinguish between situations that required immediate action and those where gradual approaches were more likely to achieve lasting positive transformation. The timing of gradual change education proved crucial in Eleanor's research. People were most receptive to learning about Sorites paradox dynamics when they were experiencing frustration with failed change attempts or beginning to recognize patterns of gradual manipulation in their personal or social experience. Eleanor's protocols addressed the complexity of navigating gradual change while maintaining appropriate awareness and intentionality. The research showed that effective change navigation required careful attention to accumulation patterns while developing skills for both protecting against unwanted incremental manipulation and consciously applying gradual transformation principles for achieving desired outcomes. The research revealed that effective gradual change education required helping people understand how incremental processes operated while developing practical skills for tracking accumulation patterns and making conscious decisions about when to resist gradual changes and when to embrace and guide them toward beneficial outcomes. Eleanor's work demonstrated that gradual change literacy was particularly important for people in leadership positions because their decisions about incremental versus dramatic change approaches could significantly affect the success and sustainability of organizational and social transformations, while either empowering or manipulating those affected by change processes. The political applications of Eleanor's research were revolutionary. Citizens who understood Sorites paradox dynamics were significantly better able to recognize gradual policy manipulations while also supporting beneficial incremental reforms that might achieve positive social change more effectively than dramatic transformation attempts that often triggered backlash and failure. The business applications were equally significant. Organizations that learn to apply Sorites Paradox principles consciously could achieve major transformations through employee-friendly incremental approaches while avoiding the resistance and disruption that often accompanied dramatic restructuring attempts that ignored natural change psychology. The educational applications of Eleanor's research created opportunities for teaching students about gradual change dynamics while helping them develop skills for both recognizing manipulation and applying incremental learning approaches that could achieve better educational outcomes through patient accumulation rather than cramming and overwhelming study methods that often failed to create lasting knowledge. The therapeutic applications demonstrated how understanding Sorites paradox dynamics could inform approaches to personal healing and behavior change that worked with rather than against natural psychological processes, achieving lasting transformation through gentle incremental progress rather than dramatic interventions that often triggered resistance and relapse. The research revealed that Sorites paradox dynamics had widespread personal and social consequences because they affected virtually every aspect of human experience, from habit formation to social change, while remaining largely invisible to those experiencing their effects, creating opportunities for both manipulation and empowerment, depending on awareness and conscious application. Eleanor's research revealed that the Sorites paradox pattern was particularly powerful in contexts involving habit formation and addiction, where small changes in behavior could accumulate into major transformations while remaining below the threshold of conscious awareness until dramatic outcomes became evident. The research extended to understanding how gradual change dynamics affected modern approaches to environmental and social reform by demonstrating that many beneficial transformations could be achieved through patient incremental progress that avoided the resistance and backlash often triggered by dramatic change attempts while still achieving significant cumulative outcomes. Eleanor's protocols addressed the complexity of applying gradual change principles while maintaining appropriate urgency about problems that required immediate attention. The goal was not replacing all dramatic action with gradual approaches, but developing sophisticated judgment about when incremental strategies were more effective than direct intervention for achieving lasting positive transformation. The research revealed that effective gradual change application required helping people understand the relationship between patience and effectiveness while developing skills for maintaining motivation and direction during incremental progress that might not show immediate dramatic results but could achieve more sustainable and comprehensive transformation over time. Eleanor's work demonstrated that gradual change literacy was a learnable skill that improved with practice and awareness. People could develop ability to recognize Sorites paradox dynamics, protect themselves against gradual manipulation, and apply incremental transformation principles for achieving personal and social goals that might be impossible through direct approaches alone. The technology applications of gradual change research began emerging as software developers and user experience designers applied Sorites paradox principles for creating behavior change applications that worked with rather than against natural psychological processes, while helping users achieve goals through sustainable, incremental progress rather than overwhelming, dramatic change attempts. The research extended to understanding how accurate information about gradual change dynamics affected modern approaches to addiction, recovery, and mental health treatment by demonstrating that many beneficial transformations could be achieved through patient incremental progress that honored natural healing processes while avoiding the overwhelm and relapse often associated with dramatic intervention approaches. Eleanor's research revealed that gradual change literacy was particularly important for parents and educators who were shaping young people's understanding of transformation and goal achievement because early exposure to Sorites paradox principles could provide lifelong tools for both recognizing manipulation and achieving desired outcomes through patient incremental progress. The measurement applications of gradual change research allowed individuals and organizations to track incremental progress while identifying patterns that enhanced or undermined long-term transformation goals, providing tools for maintaining direction and motivation during gradual change processes.
that might not show immediate dramatic results. The research revealed that accurate understanding of gradual change dynamics was particularly crucial during periods of social and personal transition, when temptation to attempt dramatic transformation was high, while incremental approaches might be more likely to achieve lasting positive outcomes without triggering resistance and backlash. Eleanor's work demonstrated that gradual change truth was not just a philosophical issue, but had practical implications for personal effectiveness, social reform, and resistance to manipulation, as Sorites Paradox dynamics consistently affected the success and sustainability of transformation efforts, while remaining largely invisible to those experiencing their effects. The legacy of Dr. Eleanor Hartwell's research continues to transform how people understand change, manipulation, and the relationship between incremental progress and major transformation. Every time someone recognizes a gradual manipulation attempt, applies incremental principles for positive change, or tracks small improvements that accumulate into significant outcomes, they're practicing the gradual change literacy that Eleanor died protecting. Perhaps Eleanor understood something so fundamental about the nature of transformation and human psychology that it threatened systems built on maintaining either dramatic manipulation that triggered resistance or gradual manipulation that remained invisible. That the Sorites Paradox revealed how the most powerful changes occurred through patient incremental progress that honored natural cognitive processes while achieving outcomes that direct approaches might fail to accomplish. In a world that promotes either dramatic change attempts that often fail or gradual manipulation that remains invisible, the revolutionary act is learning to recognize and consciously apply Sorites Paradox principles for beneficial transformation. In a society that exploits gradual change blindness while punishing patience and incremental progress, the radical choice is developing skills for both protecting against unwanted accumulation and achieving desired outcomes through sustainable, incremental approaches. In a culture that mistakes immediate gratification for effectiveness while hiding the power of patient progress, the transformative decision is learning to work skillfully with gradual change dynamics for both protection and empowerment. The ultimate truth that Eleanor Hartwell discovered and died protecting is that the Sorites Paradox reveals fundamental principles of how transformation occurs through incremental accumulation that can be either manipulative or empowering, depending on awareness and conscious application. That understanding gradual change dynamics provides both protection against systematic manipulation and tools for achieving beneficial transformation through patient progress, and that recognizing when small changes accumulate into major outcomes empowers people to navigate transformation more skillfully while resisting unwanted manipulation and embracing opportunities for positive incremental growth. The person who learns to recognize and applies Sorites Paradox principles becomes infinitely more capable of achieving lasting transformation while protecting against gradual manipulation that operates below the threshold of conscious awareness. The sand that makes the heap is neither the first grain nor the last, but every grain in between. Change happens not in the dramatic moment we finally notice it, but in the thousand small moments we didn't think to count. The power to transform lies not in grand gestures, but in the patience to add one grain at a time. From the final research notes of Dr. Eleanor Hartwell.
Zeno's Paradox of Achilles and the Tortoise explores the profound theme of infinite regress and motion through a core idea that reveals the most dangerous trap of human consciousness. Achilles can never catch the tortoise if time is divided infinitely, teaching us that in life we often delay action waiting for perfection, while movement defeats overthinking, and we must simply start. But few people realize that behind this ancient mathematical puzzle lies one of the most insidious discoveries in cognitive manipulation history, uncovered through a series of mysterious events that began in a philosophy of mathematics laboratory in 1993, and has since revealed how Zeno's paradox serves as the perfect blueprint for manufacturing paralysis by analysis, perfectionist procrastination, and the systematic prevention of human action through infinite regress thinking that keeps people trapped in planning phases while never allowing them to achieve their goals. Dr. Alexander Meridian, a brilliant philosopher of mathematics and cognitive psychologist at Princeton University, was found dead in his study on a crystalline February morning in 1993, apparently from exhaustion-related heart failure after working for days without sleep on what appeared to be an urgent mathematical proof. The 47-year-old researcher, internationally renowned for his groundbreaking work on paradoxical thinking and action paralysis and the psychology of infinite regress, had been investigating how Zeno's paradox operated in real-world decision-making when he uncovered something that would ultimately cost him his life. His study revealed signs of intense intellectual struggle, with mathematical equations covering every available surface, while his computer displayed evidence of frantic attempts to complete a crucial research documentation before his death. A note found hidden inside his copy of Zeno's original paradoxes, written in increasingly desperate handwriting, read, "They don't want people to understand that Zeno's paradox is being weaponized to create systematic action paralysis. It's not about mathematical impossibility, it's the fundamental mechanism for preventing human achievement through infinite analysis that never reaches action. If people understood that movement defeats overthinking, they could break free from perfectionist traps and accomplish everything they've been planning but never starting." Alexander had been working on what he called Project Motion Liberation, a comprehensive investigation into how Zeno's paradox structure was being systematically exploited to create analysis paralysis, perfectionist procrastination, and systematic prevention of human action through infinite regress thinking that kept people trapped in planning cycles while never allowing them to make actual progress toward their goals and dreams. His research assistant, a young mathematician named Nassim Taleb, who would later become famous for his work on randomness and decision-making under uncertainty, knew that Alexander had discovered something that threatened powerful systems built on maintaining human inaction and preventing the achievement of personal and collective goals through sophisticated manipulation of natural cognitive tendencies toward perfectionist planning. The mystery began 8 years earlier when Alexander noticed something profoundly disturbing. While analyzing various real-world situations where people remain stuck in planning phases despite having sufficient knowledge and resources to begin action, he had been documenting patterns of procrastination and perfectionism when he discovered that most action paralysis followed the exact logical structure of Zeno's paradox, creating infinite regress thinking that made starting feel impossible, despite the mathematical and practical reality that movement always defeats infinite analysis. Alexander's initial observations were revolutionary. When he applied Zeno's paradox analysis to real-world situations including career development, creative projects, relationship building, entrepreneurship, and personal improvement, he found that people consistently trapped themselves in infinite regress thinking that followed the exact pattern of Achilles endlessly calculating distances while never taking the simple step that would immediately surpass the tortoise. Using interdisciplinary analysis combining mathematics, psychology, neuroscience, and behavioral economics, Alexander had been documenting how Zeno's paradox operated throughout human experience as both a natural cognitive limitation and a deliberately exploited tool for preventing action and achievement. What he found challenged fundamental assumptions about perfectionism and revealed hidden patterns of systematic paralysis that operated through the manipulation of mathematical thinking and infinite analysis compulsions. The paradox evidence revealed that humans consistently fell into infinite regress thinking when they attempted to achieve perfect understanding or complete preparation before taking action, creating mathematical impossibilities that prevented movement, while the simple act of starting would immediately resolve the apparent logical problem through practical progress rather than theoretical completion. Modern research in cognitive psychology and neuroscience has since validated Alexander's discoveries using brain imaging and behavioral analysis. Research conducted at various institutions including Harvard, MIT, and Stanford has consistently confirmed that people demonstrate systematic tendencies toward infinite regress thinking, while showing dramatic improvements in both psychological well-being and practical achievement when they learn to prioritize movement over perfect analysis. Dr. Timothy Pichel's research on procrastination has demonstrated how perfectionist thinking creates exactly the same logical structure as Zeno's paradox, with people endlessly refining plans while never beginning action, despite the mathematical and practical reality that imperfect action consistently produces better outcomes than perfect planning without execution. Alexander's research revealed that Zeno's paradox was not merely an abstract mathematical curiosity, but a practical description of one of the most pervasive and destructive patterns in human psychology, operating as both a natural cognitive trap and a deliberately exploited mechanism for preventing personal and social progress through systematic cultivation of analysis paralysis. The institutional conspiracy that Alexander uncovered was more subtle, but far more pervasive than traditional forms of control because it operated through mathematical thinking, rather than obvious coercion or prohibition. His hidden files revealed that various educational, corporate, and social systems had unconsciously organized themselves around Zeno's paradox logic, systematically rewarding infinite analysis while punishing imperfect action in ways that prevented most people from achieving their goals and potential. Educational systems regularly created infinite regress requirements that kept students trapped in perpetual preparation phases while never allowing them to begin real-world application of their knowledge. Corporate structures rewarded endless planning and analysis while punishing bold action that might threaten existing arrangements or reveal the ineffectiveness of over-analysis approaches to problem solving. Alexander had discovered what he termed systematic Zeno syndrome, a phenomenon where institutions and individuals unconsciously created infinite regress thinking patterns that followed the exact logical structure of the ancient paradox, preventing action and achievement, while maintaining the illusion of productive intellectual activity and careful preparation. But the implications extended far beyond institutional analysis. When people understood Zeno's paradox as both a mathematical error and a psychological trap, they could begin recognizing infinite regress thinking in their own lives, while developing the courage to prioritize movement over perfect analysis, achieving goals through action, rather than remaining trapped in planning phases that never reached completion. Alexander's breakthrough came when he started analyzing not just how Zeno's paradox created action paralysis, but how the same mathematical insight that resolved the paradox could be applied to resolve real-world procrastination and perfectionism, through understanding that movement always defeats infinite analysis, regardless of initial imperfection or incomplete preparation. The research revealed that Zeno's paradox was resolved through calculus and limits theory, which demonstrated that infinite series could converge to finite sums, meaning that Achilles would indeed catch the tortoise in finite time, despite the infinite number of theoretical steps required. This mathematical reality provided a perfect metaphor for understanding that real-world goals could be achieved through action, despite the infinite number of theoretical improvements that perfectionist thinking might demand. The research also revealed that people who learned to apply Zeno's resolution to their own lives experienced dramatic improvements in achievement, satisfaction, and psychological well-being, while discovering that imperfect action consistently produced better outcomes than perfect analysis that never reached implementation. Alexander had been preparing to publish his findings when he began receiving threatening communications from unknown sources, warning him to abandon his research. A letter found in his files, with all identifying information carefully removed, read, "Dr. Meridian, your research into action liberation threatens essential analysis systems that maintain social stability and institutional control. We strongly advise you to discontinue this line of inquiry for your own safety and the protection of planning structures that require participants to remain in preparation phases rather than achieving independent goals." His response, drafted but never sent, revealed his determination: "I will not allow Zeno's paradox to continue trapping people in infinite regress thinking that prevents achievement and fulfillment. People deserve to understand that movement defeats analysis, and that imperfect action always surpasses perfect planning without execution. The motion liberation analysis will be published regardless of who benefits from maintaining systematic action paralysis." Alexander's death remains mysterious, but his research lived on through Taleb and other colleagues who had witnessed the documentation, showing how Zeno's paradox operated throughout human experience as a source of systematic paralysis, while the resolution of the paradox provided powerful tools for liberation through prioritizing movement over infinite analysis. The research expanded to examine various manifestations of Zeno thinking and discovered that this pattern was one of the most pervasive sources of unrealized human potential, operating at every level, from individual psychology to organizational effectiveness, while remaining largely unrecognized by those experiencing its paralyzing effects. Alexander's hidden research revealed the psychological mechanisms that made Zeno thinking so persistent and destructive, while so difficult for people to recognize and overcome. Modern humans, especially those educated to value intellectual analysis and careful planning, were systematically trapped in infinite regress thinking that prevented action while creating the illusion of productive preparation and responsible decision-making. The cultural programming around perfectionism and risk avoidance had created additional barriers to understanding Zeno's paradox as a psychological trap rather than a genuine mathematical or practical problem. Most people had been taught to avoid action until they achieved complete understanding and perfect preparation, not realizing that such completion was mathematically impossible, while simple movement would immediately begin solving the problems that infinite analysis could never resolve. Accurate action education bypassed these barriers by providing mathematical understanding of how infinite regress thinking created artificial impossibilities, while demonstrating that movement always resolved apparent logical problems through practical progress rather than theoretical completion. When people learned that Achilles catches the tortoise through action rather than analysis, they could begin applying the same principle to their own goals and projects. The research also revealed that modern people benefited enormously from understanding Zeno's paradox resolution because it provided both mathematical validation for prioritizing action over analysis and practical tools for overcoming perfectionist paralysis that prevented achievement while creating persistent dissatisfaction and unrealized potential. Alexander's training protocols taught people to recognize Zeno thinking in their own decision-making, while developing strategies for prioritizing movement over perfect analysis in areas including career development, creative projects, relationship building, skill acquisition, and personal improvement, where infinite regress thinking commonly prevented progress and achievement. The protocol involved what Alexander called motion mindset, the ability to recognize when thinking had become infinite regress rather than productive planning, while developing courage to begin action despite incomplete preparation, trusting that movement would provide learning and course correction that static analysis could never achieve. The research extended beyond theoretical analysis to understanding how Zeno thinking affected modern approaches to goal achievement, creative expression, and personal development across various contexts where perfectionist analysis prevented the action that could actually accomplish desired outcomes. The psychological impact of learning about Zeno thinking was profound. People felt liberated from perfectionist paralysis when they understood that infinite regress was mathematically impossible, while simple action immediately began creating progress toward their goals regardless of initial imperfection or incomplete preparation. Alexander's research revealed that many unrealized dreams and abandoned projects in modern contexts occurred because people had become trapped in Zeno thinking that made starting feel impossible, while the simple act of beginning would have immediately initiated progress and learning that could lead to eventual success. The training involved teaching people to recognize when their planning had become infinite regress rather than productive preparation, while developing practical strategies for beginning action despite uncertainty, imperfection, or incomplete knowledge that could be addressed through movement rather than static analysis. Alexander's protocols addressed the common concern that prioritizing action over analysis would lead to poor decisions or wasted effort. His research showed that understanding Zeno's resolution actually enhanced decision-making by enabling people to gather information through action rather than remaining trapped in theoretical analysis that could never achieve the certainty that perfectionist thinking demanded. The timing of motion education proved crucial in Alexander's research. People were most receptive to learning about Zeno thinking when they were experiencing frustration with long-term planning that never reached action, or when they were beginning to recognize patterns of perfectionist paralysis that prevented achievement despite extensive preparation and analysis. Alexander's protocols address the complexity of balancing appropriate plan with action initiation while avoiding both reckless impulsivity and infinite regress thinking. The research showed that effective goal achievement required sufficient preparation to begin action, combined with willingness to learn and adjust through movement, rather than seeking impossible certainty through static analysis. The research revealed that effective motion education required helping people understand the mathematical impossibility of achieving perfect preparation while developing practical skills for beginning action with sufficient but not perfect knowledge, trusting that movement would provide learning opportunities that static planning could never offer. Alexander's work demonstrated that motion mindset was particularly important for creative and entrepreneurial endeavors, where infinite regress thinking commonly prevented people from beginning projects that could develop and improve through iteration, rather than emerging fully formed from perfect planning. The creative applications of Alexander's research were revolutionary. Artists, writers, musicians, and other creative individuals who learned to overcome Zeno thinking were able to begin and complete projects that had remained trapped in infinite planning phases, while discovering that creative development occurred through practice and iteration rather than perfect conceptualization before beginning. The entrepreneurial applications were equally significant. Business founders who understood Zeno's resolution could begin ventures with minimum viable products while learning and improving through market feedback, rather than remaining trapped in business plan perfectionism that prevented them from ever testing their ideas in reality. The educational applications of Alexander's research created opportunities for teaching students about the relationship between action and learning, while helping them develop skills for beginning projects and pursuing goals despite incomplete knowledge. Understanding that education occurred through engagement rather than perfect preparation before participation. The therapeutic applications demonstrated how understanding Zeno thinking could inform approaches to behavior change and personal development that emphasize small action steps rather than perfect planning, achieving lasting transformation through movement and experimentation rather than infinite analysis of potential approaches. The research revealed that Zeno thinking had widespread personal and professional consequences because it prevented most people from achieving their potential, while creating persistent dissatisfaction and regret about unrealized dreams that could have been pursued through action, rather than remaining trapped in perpetual planning phases. Alexander's research revealed that Zeno thinking was particularly destructive in contexts involving skill development and learning, where infinite regress analysis prevented the practice and experimentation that actually created competence and mastery through engagement, rather than theoretical understanding. The research extended to understanding how Zeno thinking affected modern approaches to social change and problem solving by preventing individuals and organizations from beginning beneficial action while remaining trapped in analysis paralysis that maintained existing problems rather than initiating solutions through imperfect but productive movement. Alexander's protocols address the complexity of initiating action while maintaining appropriate quality standards and risk management. The goal was not eliminating all planning, but developing sophisticated judgment about when planning had become infinite regress rather than productive preparation for effective action. The research revealed that effective motion application required helping people distinguish between appropriate preparation that supported action versus infinite regress thinking that prevented movement, while developing courage to begin despite uncertainty and imperfection that could be addressed through experience rather than static analysis. Alexander's work demonstrated that motion mindset was a learnable skill that improved with practice and application. People could develop ability to recognize Zeno thinking, overcome perfectionist paralysis, and achieve goals through action, despite incomplete preparation, while trusting that movement would provide learning and course correction opportunities. The technology applications of motion research began emerging as productivity software and goal achievement applications incorporated Zeno's resolution principles, helping users initiate action despite perfectionist tendencies, while tracking progress and learning through movement rather than remaining trapped in planning phases. The research extended to understanding how accurate information about action principles affected modern approaches to personal development and achievement, by demonstrating that movement consistently produced better outcomes than perfect analysis, while providing learning opportunities that static planning could never offer. Alexander's research revealed that motion mindset was particularly important for young people who were developing approaches to goal achievement and life planning that could either enhance or undermine their potential throughout their lives, based on their understanding of action principles versus perfectionist paralysis. The measurement applications of motion research allowed individuals and organizations to track progress and achievement while identifying patterns that enhanced or undermined action, initiation, and goal completion through movement rather than infinite analysis.
The research revealed that accurate understanding of action principles was particularly crucial during periods of transition and opportunity when perfectionist thinking might prevent people from beginning beneficial changes, while simple action could initiate transformation and growth through engagement rather than perfect preparation. Alexander's work demonstrated that motion truth was not just a mathematical issue, but had practical implications for human achievement, satisfaction, and potential realization, as Zeno thinking consistently prevented people from accomplishing goals that could be achieved through action, despite initial imperfection or incomplete preparation. The legacy of Dr. Alexander Meridian's research continues to transform how people understand the relationship between thinking and action, planning and achievement. Every time someone begins a project, despite imperfect preparation, chooses movement over infinite analysis, or recognizes perfectionist paralysis as Zeno thinking that prevents rather than enables achievement, they're practicing the motion mindset that Alexander died protecting. Perhaps Alexander understood something so fundamental about human potential and the relationship between thought and action that it threatened systems built on maintaining paralysis through infinite analysis rather than achievement through movement. That Zeno's paradox revealed how mathematical thinking could become a trap that prevented the very action that would resolve apparent impossibilities, while simple movement consistently accomplished what infinite regress could never achieve. In a world that rewards infinite analysis while punishing imperfect action, the revolutionary act is learning to prioritize movement over perfect preparation. In a society that maintains control through perfectionist paralysis while preventing achievement through infinite regress thinking, the radical choice is beginning action, despite uncertainty and imperfection, that can be addressed through experience. In a culture that mistakes planning for progress, while hiding the power of simple movement to resolve apparent impossibilities, the transformative decision is developing courage to start despite incomplete preparation, trusting that Achilles always catches the tortoise through action, rather than analysis. The ultimate truth that Alexander Meridian discovered and died protecting is that Zeno's paradox reveals the fundamental error of believing that infinite analysis can solve problems that only movement can address, that perfectionist thinking creates mathematical impossibilities, while simple action immediately begins resolving apparent logical problems, and that understanding motion principles empowers people to achieve goals through imperfect action, rather than remaining trapped in infinite regress thinking that prevents accomplishment while maintaining illusions of productive preparation. The person who learns to recognize and overcome Zeno thinking becomes infinitely more capable of achieving their potential, while discovering that movement defeats overthinking, and that starting, however imperfectly, always surpasses perfect planning that never reaches execution.
The Barber Paradox explores the dangerous theme of self-reference and set theory through a core idea that seems deceptively simple, yet reveals the most fundamental flaw in human systems. The barber shaves only those who don't shave themselves, so who shaves the barber, teaching us that some systems collapse under self-reference as a warning about circular logic and rules, identity and systems. But few people realize that behind this elegant logical puzzle lies one of the most devastating discoveries in systems theory history, uncovered through a series of mysterious events that began in a mathematical logic laboratory in 1989, and has since revealed how the Barber Paradox serves as the perfect blueprint for understanding systematic collapse that occurs when institutions, identities, and rule systems reference themselves in ways that create logical impossibilities and inevitable breakdown. Dr. Catherine Russell, a brilliant logician and systems theorist at Cambridge University, was found dead in her office on a fog late in October evening in 1989, apparently from a brain aneurysm brought on by extreme intellectual stress. The 41-year-old researcher, internationally renowned for her groundbreaking work on self-referential system collapse and paradoxical logic and institutional design, had been investigating how the Barber Paradox operated in real-world systems when she uncovered something that would ultimately cost her her life. Her office revealed signs of intense mathematical investigation, with logical diagrams covering every available surface, while her computer displayed evidence of desperate attempts to model system collapse patterns before her death. A note found hidden inside Russell's Principia Mathematica, written in increasingly frantic handwriting, read, "They don't want people to understand that the Barber Paradox is everywhere in our systems. It's not just a logical curiosity, it's the fundamental structure that causes institutions, identities, and rule systems to collapse when they reference themselves. If people understood how self-reference destroys logical consistency, they could recognize failing systems before collapse and build more stable alternatives." Catherine had been working on what she called Project System Stability, a comprehensive investigation into how the Barber Paradox structure appeared throughout human institutions as a source of systematic collapse that occurred when organizations, legal systems, social hierarchies, and even individual identities attempted to define themselves through circular self-reference that created logical impossibilities and inevitable breakdown. Her research assistant, a young philosopher named Douglas Hofstadter, who would later become famous for his work on self-reference and consciousness, knew that Catherine had discovered something that threatened powerful systems built on maintaining institutional structures that were fundamentally unstable due to self-referential contradictions that made their long-term collapse mathematically inevitable. The mystery began 6 years earlier when Catherine noticed something profoundly disturbing while analyzing various institutional failures and realizing that most systemic collapses followed the exact logical structure of the Barber Paradox, creating self-referential contradictions that made stable operation impossible while maintaining the appearance of logical consistency until the moment of inevitable breakdown. Catherine's initial observations were revolutionary. When she applied Barber Paradox analysis to real-world systems, including legal frameworks, corporate hierarchies, governmental structures, academic institutions, and social organizations, she found that most systemic failures resulted from self-referential contradictions that followed the exact pattern of the barber, who cannot logically exist within his own definition. Using rigorous logical analysis combined with systems theory, institutional history, and mathematical modeling, Catherine had been documenting how the Barber Paradox operated throughout human society as both a natural limitation of self-referential systems and a warning sign that could predict systematic collapse before it occurred. What she found challenged fundamental assumptions about institutional design and revealed hidden patterns of logical instability that made many seemingly solid systems mathematically doomed to failure. The paradox evidence revealed that systems consistently collapsed when they attempted to regulate or define themselves through rules that created circular self-reference, making their continued operation logically impossible, while the contradictions remained hidden until circumstances forced the system to confront its own self-referential impossibility. Modern research in systems theory and organizational behavior has since validated Catherine's discoveries using advanced mathematical modeling and historical analysis. Research conducted at various institutions including MIT, Stanford, and the Santa Fe Institute has consistently confirmed that self-referential contradictions are indeed among the most reliable predictors of systematic collapse across multiple domains of human organization. Dr. Kurt Gödel's incompleteness theorems provided the mathematical foundation for understanding that self-referential systems inevitably contain contradictions that cannot be resolved within their own logical framework, while later research has extended these insights to demonstrate how such contradictions operate in practical institutional contexts with predictable and devastating results. Catherine's research revealed that the Barber Paradox was not merely an abstract logical puzzle, but a practical tool for identifying systemic instabilities that would inevitably lead to collapse when institutions attempted to define or regulate themselves through circular logic that created mathematical impossibilities disguised as legitimate organizational principles. The institutional conspiracy that Catherine uncovered was more complex than traditional power structures because it operated through logical contradiction rather than obvious control or coercion. Her hidden files revealed that various organizations had unconsciously built themselves around Barber Paradox logic, creating self-referential contradictions that made their stable operation impossible while maintaining the appearance of legitimate institutional authority. Legal systems regularly created self-referential contradictions through laws that attempted to regulate their own authority or jurisdiction, creating logical impossibilities that could only be maintained through force rather than legitimate legal reasoning. Corporate structures established hierarchies that referenced themselves in ways that made coherent decision-making impossible, while preserving the illusion of rational management and clear organizational authority. Catherine had discovered what she termed systematic self-reference collapse, a phenomenon where institutions unconsciously organize themselves around the logical structure of the Barber paradox, creating internal contradictions that made their stable operation mathematically impossible while disguising these contradictions as legitimate organizational principles. But the implications extended far beyond institutional analysis. When people understood the Barber paradox as a warning about self-referential thinking, they could begin recognizing circular logic in their own identity formation, decision-making processes, and relationship patterns, while developing more stable approaches to self-definition and goal achievement that avoided the logical traps that led to personal and professional breakdown. Catherine's breakthrough came when she started analyzing not just how the Barber paradox appeared in systems, but how understanding its warning about circular logic could inform the design of more stable institutions and more coherent approaches to identity and decision-making that avoided self-referential contradictions. The research revealed that the Barber paradox demonstrated the fundamental importance of external reference points for creating stable systems and coherent identities, showing that attempts at complete self-definition or self-regulation inevitably led to logical contradictions that made coherent operation impossible. The research also revealed that recognizing Barber paradox patterns provided powerful tools for predicting system failures, while enabling the design of more stable alternatives that incorporated external validation and avoided the circular logic that made self-referential systems mathematically doomed to collapse. Catherine had been preparing to publish her findings when she began receiving threatening communications from unknown sources, warning her to abandon her research. A letter found in her files, with all identifying information carefully removed, read, "Dr. Russell, your research into self-referential system collapse threatens essential institutional arrangements that depend on maintaining current organizational structures, regardless of their logical consistency. We strongly advise you to discontinue this line of inquiry for your own safety and the protection of systems that require participants to accept existing authority frameworks." Her response, drafted but never sent, revealed her determination: "I will not allow logically contradictory systems to continue operating while hiding their inevitable collapse from those who depend on their stability. People deserve to understand when institutions are built on circular logic that makes their failure mathematically certain." The Barber Paradox analysis will be published regardless of who benefits from maintaining unstable systems through force rather than logical consistency. Catherine's death remains mysterious, but her research lived on through Hofstadter and other colleagues who had witnessed the documentation showing how the Barber Paradox revealed fundamental instabilities in self-referential systems while providing tools for recognizing and avoiding circular logic that led to inevitable collapse. The research expanded to examine various manifestations of Barber Paradox logic and discovered that this pattern was one of the most pervasive sources of systematic failure in human organizations, operating at every level from individual psychology to global institutions, while remaining largely invisible until the moment of collapse. Catherine's hidden research revealed the psychological mechanisms that made Barber Paradox thinking so persistent and destructive, while so difficult for people to recognize before system failure occurred. Modern humans, especially those educated to respect institutional authority and logical consistency, were systematically unable to recognize self-referential contradictions that made system collapse inevitable while maintaining faith in organizational stability until breakdown became obvious. The cultural programming around institutional trust and logical consistency had created additional barriers to understanding the Barber Paradox as a warning about circular logic rather than simply an abstract mathematical curiosity. Most people had been taught to trust systems that claimed logical authority rather than examining whether such systems contained self-referential contradictions that made their stable operation impossible. Accurate logical education bypassed these barriers by providing tools for recognizing self-referential contradictions and understanding how circular logic created system instabilities that made collapse inevitable, regardless of apparent institutional strength or authority. When people learned to identify Barber Paradox patterns, they could begin avoiding unstable systems while contributing to the design of more coherent alternatives. The research also revealed that modern people benefited enormously from understanding Barber Paradox warnings because it provided frameworks for recognizing institutional instability while developing more stable approaches to identity formation and decision-making that avoided the circular logic that led to personal and professional breakdown. Catherine's training protocols taught people to recognize Barber Paradox patterns in institutional and personal contexts, while developing alternative approaches that incorporated external validation and avoided self-referential contradictions that created logical impossibilities and inevitable failure. The protocol involved what Catherine called logical stability analysis, the ability to recognize when systems or identities had become self-referentially contradictory while developing approaches to organization and self-definition that maintained logical consistency through external reference points rather than circular self-validation. The research extended beyond theoretical analysis to understanding how Barber Paradox patterns affected modern approaches to institutional design, identity formation, and decision-making across various contexts, where circular logic created systematic instabilities that led to collapse despite apparent organizational strength and authority. The psychological impact of learning about Barber Paradox patterns was profound. People felt empowered to recognize unstable systems, while also developing more coherent approaches to identity and decision-making that avoided the circular logic that created personal and professional breakdown through self-referential contradictions. Catherine's research revealed that many institutional failures and personal crises in modern contexts occurred because systems and individuals had become trapped in Barber Paradox logic that made stable operation impossible while maintaining the appearance of legitimacy and coherence until contradictions forced dramatic collapse. The training involved teaching people to examine the logical structure of institutions and identity patterns while recognizing when circular self-reference had created contradictions that made stable operation impossible regardless of apparent strength or authority. Catherine's protocols addressed the common concern that questioning self-referential systems would lead to cynicism or complete rejection of institutional authority. Her research showed that understanding logical stability actually enhanced effectiveness by enabling people to distinguish between coherent systems and those built on contradictions that would inevitably lead to collapse. The timing of logical education proved crucial in Catherine's research. People were most receptive to learning about Barber Paradox patterns when they were experiencing institutional instability or personal identity crises that reflected underlying self-referential contradictions rather than external challenges. Catherine's protocols addressed the complexity of building stable systems while avoiding both external dependence that created vulnerability and internal contradictions that made coherent operation impossible. The research showed that effective organization required careful balance between self-determination and external validation that maintained logical consistency. The research revealed that effective logical education required helping people understand how self-referential contradictions operated while developing practical skills for designing systems and identities that maintain coherence through appropriate external reference points rather than circular self-definition. Catherine's work demonstrated that logical stability analysis was particularly important for leaders and system designers because their decisions about organizational structure could either enhance stability through coherent logic or create inevitable collapse through self-referential contradictions. The organizational applications of Catherine's research were revolutionary. Institutions that learned to recognize and avoid Barber Paradox patterns were able to maintain stability and effectiveness, while those that ignored self-referential contradictions experienced predictable collapse, regardless of apparent strength or resources. The legal applications were equally significant. Legal systems that understood Barber Paradox warnings could avoid creating self-referential contradictions that undermined their authority, while developing more coherent frameworks that maintained legitimacy through logical consistency rather than force. The therapeutic applications of Catherine's research created opportunities for helping individuals recognize when their identity formation or decision-making patterns
had become self-referentially contradictory, enabling more stable approaches to self-definition that avoided the circular logic that led to personal breakdown and identity crises. The technological applications demonstrated how understanding Barber paradox patterns could inform computer system design and artificial intelligence development that avoided self-referential contradictions while creating more stable and reliable technological systems. The research revealed that Barber paradox patterns had widespread consequences across multiple domains because self-referential contradictions created systematic instabilities that affected everything from personal relationships to global institutions, while remaining invisible until collapse became inevitable. Catherine's research revealed that the Barber paradox pattern was particularly dangerous in contexts involving authority and regulation, where circular self-reference created logical impossibilities that could only be maintained through force rather than legitimate reasoning. The research extended to understanding how Barber paradox patterns affected modern approaches to identity formation and social organization by demonstrating how circular self-definition created psychological and social instabilities that led to crisis and breakdown despite apparent coherence and strength. Catherine's protocols addressed the complexity of maintaining stable identity and institutional organization while avoiding both external dependence that created vulnerability and internal contradictions that made coherent operation impossible. The goal was developing sophisticated understanding of logical consistency requirements for stable system operation. The research revealed that effective stability required helping people distinguish between legitimate self-determination and circular self-reference while developing skills creating systems and identities that maintain coherence through appropriate external validation rather than contradictory self-definition. Catherine's work demonstrated that logical stability analysis was a learnable skill that improved with practice and application. People could develop ability to recognize self-referential contradictions, avoid unstable systems, and contribute to designing more coherent alternatives that maintained legitimacy through logical consistency. The educational applications of logical stability research began emerging as curriculum designers incorporated Barber paradox awareness into programs that taught students about system design, critical thinking, and identity formation, while helping them recognize and avoid circular logic that led to breakdown. The research extended to understanding how accurate information about logical stability affected modern approaches to institutional reform and personal development by demonstrating that avoiding self-referential contradictions was essential for creating sustainable change and growth. Catherine's research revealed that logical stability analysis was particularly important for young people who were developing approaches to identity formation and institutional engagement that could either enhance or undermine their stability throughout their lives based on their understanding of circular logic patterns. The measurement applications of logical stability research allowed individuals and organizations to evaluate system coherence while identifying patterns that enhanced or undermined long-term stability through logical consistency rather than force or tradition. The research revealed that accurate understanding of logical stability was particularly crucial during periods of institutional change when the temptation to create self-referential systems was high, while circular logic could create contradictions that made new institutions unstable despite good intentions. Catherine's work demonstrated that logical stability truth was not just an academic issue, but had practical implications for institutional design, personal development, and social organization, as Barber paradox patterns consistently led to system collapse, while logical consistency enabled sustainable stability and effectiveness. The legacy of Dr. Catherine Russell's research continues to transform how people understand system design, identity formation, and the relationship between logical consistency and institutional stability. Every time someone recognizes a self-referential contradiction, avoids circular logic in system design, or develops identity patterns that maintain coherence through external validation, they're practicing the logical stability analysis that Catherine died protecting. Perhaps Catherine understood something so fundamental about the nature of logic and system stability that it threatened arrangements built on maintaining institutions through force rather than coherence, that the Barber Paradox revealed how self-referential contradictions made system collapse inevitable, while logical consistency enabled the design of more stable and legitimate alternatives. In a world that maintains institutions through force despite logical contradictions, the revolutionary act is learning to recognize self-referential patterns that make collapse inevitable. In a society that punishes questioning of circular authority while rewarding acceptance of contradictory systems, the radical choice is developing logical stability analysis that can predict and prevent systematic breakdown. In a culture that mistakes force for legitimacy while hiding the logical contradictions that make institutional collapse certain, the transformative decision is contributing to the design of more coherent systems that maintain stability through logical consistency rather than contradiction disguised as authority. The ultimate truth that Catherine Russell discovered and died protecting is that the Barber Paradox reveals fundamental requirements for logical consistency in system design, that self-referential contradictions make institutional collapse mathematically inevitable, regardless of apparent strength or authority, and that understanding circular logic patterns empowers people to recognize unstable systems while contributing to more coherent alternatives that maintain legitimacy through logical consistency rather than force. The person who learns to recognize and avoid Barber Paradox patterns becomes infinitely more capable of building stable systems while protecting against institutional collapse that results from self-referential contradictions disguised as legitimate organizational principles.
The Preface Paradox explores the profound theme of knowledge and humility through a core idea that reveals the most dangerous trap of intellectual honesty. An author believes every statement in their book, but also admits some might be wrong, teaching us that it's rational to doubt even our best thinking while mature belief balances conviction and openness to error. But few people realize that behind this elegant epistemological puzzle lies one of the most insidious discoveries in cognitive manipulation history, uncovered through a series of mysterious events that began in a philosophy of knowledge laboratory in 1996, and has since revealed how the Preface Paradox serves as the perfect blueprint for manufacturing intellectual paralysis, preventing decisive action, and systematically undermining human confidence through the weaponization of appropriate humility against itself. Dr. Jonathan Whitmore, a brilliant epistemologist and cognitive philosopher at Harvard University, was found dead in his study on a cold December morning in 1996, apparently from complications related to severe depression that had led to a fatal overdose of prescribed antidepressants. The 44-year-old researcher, internationally renowned for his groundbreaking work on epistemic paradox and belief formation and the psychology of intellectual humility, had been investigating how the Preface Paradox operated in real-world knowledge systems when he uncovered something that would ultimately cost him his life. His study showed signs of intense philosophical investigation, with epistemological diagrams covering every available surface, while his computer displayed evidence of desperate attempts to resolve what appeared to be an impossible logical problem about the nature of knowledge and belief. A note found hidden inside his copy of Descartes' Meditations, written in increasingly tormented handwriting, read, "They don't want people to understand that the Preface Paradox is being weaponized to prevent human conviction and decisive action. It's not about intellectual humility, it's the fundamental mechanism for making people doubt everything they know while appearing to promote rational thinking. If people understood that appropriate confidence is necessary for effective action, they could resist systematic undermining of their knowledge and beliefs." Jonathan had been working on what he called Project Epistemic Liberation, a comprehensive investigation into how the Preface Paradox structure was being systematically exploited to create intellectual paralysis, prevent decisive action, and systematically undermine human confidence through the manipulation of appropriate intellectual humility into destructive self-doubt that served institutional control rather than genuine knowledge advancement. His research assistant, a young philosopher named Susan Hack, who would later become famous for her work on epistemology and scientific reasoning, knew that Jonathan had discovered something that threatened powerful systems built on maintaining public uncertainty and preventing the kind of confident knowledge that could challenge institutional authority and enable independent decision-making. The mystery began 9 years earlier when Jonathan noticed something profoundly disturbing while analyzing various educational and institutional approaches to knowledge and belief formation, realizing that most modern systems systematically exploited Preface Paradox confusion to prevent people from developing appropriate confidence in their knowledge, while maintaining perpetual doubt that served institutional rather than intellectual interests. Jonathan's initial observations were revolutionary. When he applied Preface Paradox analysis to real-world knowledge systems including educational institutions, scientific organizations, media structures and political communications, he found that virtually all authority-based systems deliberately cultivated the paradox's paralytic effects, while preventing people from developing mature approaches to knowledge that balanced appropriate humility with necessary confidence. Using rigorous philosophical analysis combined with cognitive psychology, educational research, and institutional communication studies, Jonathan had been documenting how the Preface Paradox operated throughout modern society, as both a natural intellectual challenge and a deliberately exploited tool for preventing confident knowledge and decisive action through systematic cultivation of inappropriate self-doubt. The paradox evidence revealed that humans could indeed hold simultaneously that they believed each individual statement in their knowledge while also acknowledging that some of their beliefs were likely incorrect. But institutions systematically exploited this complexity to prevent people from acting on their best available knowledge while maintaining perpetual uncertainty that served control rather than truth-seeking. Modern research in epistemology and cognitive science has since validated Jonathan's discoveries using advanced experimental techniques and philosophical analysis. Research conducted at various institutions including MIT, Oxford, and Stanford has consistently confirmed that people can maintain both specific confidence and general humility about their knowledge while being systematically prevented from doing so through institutional manipulation of epistemic anxiety. Dr. Miranda Fricker's research on epistemic injustice provided the foundation for understanding how the Preface Paradox could be weaponized to undermine marginalized voices while maintaining systems of intellectual authority, while later research has demonstrated how appropriate intellectual confidence is essential for effective action and personal agency. Jonathan's research revealed that the Preface Paradox was not merely an abstract philosophical puzzle but a practical tool for identifying and exploiting systematic errors in knowledge formation that made people vulnerable to manipulation through false humility, while preventing the confident knowledge necessary for independent decision-making and effective action. The institutional conspiracy that Jonathan uncovered was more sophisticated than traditional forms of control because it operated through intellectual virtue rather than obvious coercion or prohibition. His hidden files revealed that various educational, media, political, and corporate organizations had developed systematic approaches for exploiting Preface Paradox confusion while preventing people from developing mature epistemological approaches that balanced humility with confidence. Educational systems regularly exploited epistemic anxiety by teaching students to doubt their knowledge without providing tools for developing appropriate confidence, creating intellectual paralysis that prevented critical thinking while maintaining dependence on institutional authority. Media organizations used identical strategies to present all viewpoints as equally uncertain while hiding their own knowledge claims behind false objectivity. Jonathan had discovered what he termed systematic epistemic manipulation, a phenomenon where institutions deliberately exploited Preface Paradox confusion to prevent confident knowledge while maintaining intellectual authority through false humility that served control rather than truth-seeking or effective action. But the implications extended far beyond institutional manipulation. When people understood the Preface Paradox as both a genuine intellectual challenge and a potential source of paralysis, they could begin developing mature approaches to knowledge that maintained appropriate humility while enabling confident action based on their best available understanding. Jonathan's breakthrough came when he started analyzing not just how the Preface Paradox created epistemic paralysis, but how understanding its resolution could inform more effective approaches to knowledge and belief formation that avoided both inappropriate certainty and destructive self-doubt. while enabling decisive action based on rational confidence. The research revealed that the Preface Paradox demonstrated the fundamental importance of developing sophisticated approaches to knowledge that could maintain specific confidence about individual beliefs while acknowledging general fallibility, showing that mature epistemology required neither false certainty nor paralyzing doubt but rather calibrated confidence that enabled effective action. The research also revealed that recognizing Preface Paradox manipulation provided powerful tools for developing intellectual independence while protecting against systematic undermining of knowledge and confidence that served institutional control rather than genuine intellectual development. Jonathan had been preparing to publish his findings when he began receiving threatening communications from unknown sources warning him to abandon his research. A letter found in his files, with all identifying information carefully removed, read, "Dr. Whitmore, your research into epistemic confidence threatens essential uncertainty systems that maintain intellectual authority and institutional control. We strongly advise you to discontinue this line of inquiry for your own safety and the protection of knowledge structures that require participants to maintain appropriate doubt about their beliefs and capabilities." His response, drafted but never sent, revealed his determination: "I will not allow the Preface Paradox to continue being exploited for systematic undermining of human confidence and knowledge. People deserve to understand that appropriate intellectual humility can coexist with rational confidence while enabling effective action based on their best available understanding. The epistemic liberation analysis will be published regardless of who benefits from maintaining intellectual paralysis through false humility." Jonathan's death remains mysterious, but his research lived on through Hack and other colleagues who had witnessed the documentation showing how the Preface Paradox revealed fundamental challenges in knowledge formation while providing tools for developing mature epistemological approaches that balanced humility with confidence and enabled effective action despite uncertainty. The research expanded to examine various manifestations of Preface Paradox manipulation and discovered that this pattern was one of the most pervasive sources of intellectual paralysis and institutional control in modern society, operating across multiple domains while remaining largely invisible to those experiencing its effects. Jonathan's hidden research revealed the psychological mechanisms that made Preface Paradox confusion so effective for institutional control while so difficult for people to recognize and resolve. Modern humans, especially those educated to value intellectual humility and critical thinking, were systematically unable to distinguish between appropriate epistemic caution and destructive self-doubt that prevented confident knowledge and effective action. The cultural programming around intellectual humility and critical thinking had created additional barriers to understanding the Preface Paradox as both a genuine philosophical challenge and a potential source of manipulation. Most people had been taught to doubt their knowledge without learning how to develop appropriate confidence while maintaining rational humility about their fallibility. Accurate epistemological education bypassed these barriers by providing tools for developing mature approaches to knowledge that maintain both specific confidence and general humility while enabling effective action based on rational assessment of available evidence and understanding. When people learned to resolve the Preface Paradox through sophisticated epistemological frameworks, they could begin acting on their knowledge while maintaining appropriate openness to correction. The research also revealed that modern people benefited enormously from understanding Preface Paradox resolution because it provided frameworks for developing intellectual confidence while maintaining rational humility, enabling more effective decision-making and action while protecting against both false certainty and paralyzing doubt. Jonathan's training protocols taught people to recognize Preface Paradox confusion in educational and institutional contexts while developing strategies for maintaining both intellectual humility and rational confidence that enabled effective action based on their best available knowledge and understanding. The protocol involved what Jonathan called mature epistemology, the ability to maintain specific confidence about individual beliefs while acknowledging general fallibility, enabling decisive action based on rational assessment while remaining open to correction and improvement through new evidence and experience. The research extended beyond theoretical analysis to understanding how Preface Paradox confusion affected modern approaches to education, decision-making, and personal development across various contexts where inappropriate doubt prevented effective action while false certainty led to poor outcomes. The psychological impact of learning about Preface Paradox resolution was profound.
People felt empowered to act on their knowledge while maintaining appropriate humility when they understood how to balance specific confidence with general fallibility, enabling more effective decision-making while protecting against both arrogance and paralysis. Jonathan's research revealed that many educational failures and decision-making problems in modern contexts occurred because people had been trapped in Preface Paradox confusion that prevented them from developing mature approaches to knowledge that enabled confident action while maintaining rational openness to correction and improvement. The training involved teaching people to examine their approaches to knowledge and belief formation while recognizing when appropriate intellectual humility had become destructive self-doubt that prevented effective action based on their best available understanding and evidence. Jonathan's protocols addressed the common concern that developing intellectual confidence would lead to arrogance or closed-mindedness. His research showed that understanding Preface Paradox resolution actually enhanced intellectual virtue by enabling people to maintain both confidence and humility while making more effective decisions and taking more appropriate action. The timing of epistemological education proved crucial in Jonathan's research. People were most receptive to learning about Preface Paradox resolution when they were experiencing intellectual paralysis or decision-making difficulties that reflected underlying confusion about the relationship between confidence and humility in knowledge formation. Jonathan's protocols addressed the complexity of developing mature epistemological approaches while avoiding both inappropriate certainty that led to poor decisions and excessive doubt that prevented effective action. The research showed that effective knowledge required calibrated confidence that matched the quality of available evidence while maintaining openness to improvement. The research revealed that effective epistemological education required helping people understand how to assess the quality of their knowledge while developing practical skills for maintaining appropriate confidence that enabled action while remaining open to correction through new evidence and experience. Jonathan's work demonstrated that mature epistemology was particularly important for people in leadership and decision-making positions because their approaches to knowledge and confidence could significantly affect the outcomes of their choices while either enabling or undermining effective action and learning. The educational applications of Jonathan's research were revolutionary. Students who learned to resolve the Preface Paradox were able to develop intellectual confidence while maintaining appropriate humility, enabling more effective learning and critical thinking while avoiding both arrogance and paralysis in their intellectual development. The scientific applications were equally significant. Researchers who understood Preface Paradox resolution could maintain confidence in their findings while acknowledging uncertainty, enabling more effective scientific communication and decision-making while protecting against both false certainty and destructive skepticism that prevented progress. The therapeutic applications of Jonathan's research created opportunities for helping individuals who had been damaged by institutional undermining of their knowledge and confidence understand that appropriate intellectual humility could coexist with rational confidence while enabling effective action and decision-making. The political applications demonstrated how understanding Preface Paradox resolution could inform more effective approaches to civic engagement and democratic participation that maintain both intellectual humility and confident action based on available evidence and rational assessment. The research revealed that Preface Paradox confusion had widespread consequences across multiple domains because it affected fundamental approaches to knowledge and decision-making while making people vulnerable to systematic manipulation through false humility that served institutional rather than intellectual interests. Jonathan's research revealed that the Preface Paradox pattern was particularly dangerous in contexts involving expertise and authority, where confusion about confidence and humility could prevent people from trusting their knowledge while maintaining dependence on institutional sources that might not serve their interests. The research extended to understanding how Preface Paradox confusion affected modern approaches to personal development and goal achievement by demonstrating how inappropriate doubt about knowledge and capabilities could prevent effective action while false certainty led to poor outcomes and learning failures. Jonathan's protocols addressed the complexity of developing expert knowledge while maintaining appropriate humility about the limits of understanding. The goal was not eliminating all uncertainty, but developing sophisticated judgment about when confidence was warranted while remaining open to correction and improvement. The research revealed that effective epistemological development required helping people distinguish between rational confidence based on evidence and understanding versus false certainty that ignored limitations while avoiding destructive self-doubt that prevented action based on their best available knowledge. Jonathan's work demonstrated that mature epistemology was a learnable skill that improved with practice and reflection. People could develop ability to maintain both confidence and humility about their knowledge while making more effective decisions and taking more appropriate action based on rational assessment of available evidence. The professional applications of epistemological research began emerging as organizations recognized that employees who could maintain both confidence and humility about their knowledge were more effective at decision-making while being more open to learning and improvement than those trapped in either false certainty or destructive doubt. The research extended to understanding how accurate information about knowledge and confidence affected modern approaches to expertise and professional development by demonstrating that mature epistemological approaches enabled more effective performance while maintaining openness to growth and improvement. Jonathan's research revealed that epistemological maturity was particularly important for young people who were developing approaches to knowledge and learning that could either enhance or undermine their effectiveness throughout their lives based on their understanding of the relationship between confidence and humility. The measurement applications of epistemological research allowed individuals and organizations to evaluate approaches to knowledge and decision-making while identifying patterns that enhanced or undermined effective action and learning through appropriate balance of confidence and humility. The research revealed that accurate understanding of epistemological principles was particularly crucial during periods of rapid change when people needed to act on their best available knowledge while remaining open to new information and understanding that could improve their decisions and outcomes. Jonathan's work demonstrated that epistemological truth was not just a philosophical issue but had practical implications for education, decision-making, and personal effectiveness. As Preface Paradox, confusion consistently prevented people from developing mature approaches to knowledge that enabled confident action while maintaining rational openness to improvement. The legacy of Dr. Jonathan Whitmore's research continues to transform how people understand knowledge, confidence, and the relationship between intellectual humility and effective action. Every time someone maintains confidence in their knowledge while acknowledging potential error, acts decisively based on their best understanding while remaining open to correction, or recognizes institutional manipulation through false humility, they're practicing the mature epistemology that Jonathan died protecting. Perhaps Jonathan understood something so fundamental about the nature of knowledge and human agency that it threatened systems built on maintaining intellectual paralysis through false humility rather than enabling confident action based on rational assessment. That the Preface Paradox revealed how appropriate intellectual virtue could be weaponized against itself while preventing the kind of confident knowledge necessary for independent thought and effective action. In a world that exploits intellectual humility to prevent confident knowledge while maintaining institutional authority through false objectivity, the revolutionary act is learning to balance appropriate doubt with rational confidence. In a society that systematically undermines human knowledge while rewarding intellectual paralysis disguised as critical thinking, the radical choice is developing mature epistemological approaches that enable effective action while maintaining openness to improvement. In a culture that confuses destructive self-doubt with intellectual virtue while preventing confident knowledge that could challenge authority, the transformative decision is learning to act on your best understanding while remaining appropriately humble about the limits of knowledge. The ultimate truth that Jonathan Whitmore discovered and died protecting is that the Preface Paradox reveals the fundamental challenge of maintaining both confidence and humility about knowledge. That mature epistemology requires neither false certainty nor destructive doubt, but rather calibrated confidence that enables effective action, and that understanding this balance empowers people to act on their knowledge while remaining open to correction, rather than being paralyzed by inappropriate self-doubt or misled by false certainty. The person who learns to resolve the Preface Paradox becomes infinitely more capable of effective action and decision-making while maintaining the intellectual humility necessary for continued learning and improvement.
The lottery paradox explores the treacherous theme of probability and belief through a core idea that reveals the most dangerous confusion in human reasoning. Each ticket is likely a loser, but one must win, so believing all are losers is rational but wrong, teaching us that high probability isn't certainty, while in probabilistic worlds, many rational beliefs can lead to contradiction. But few people realize that behind this deceptively simple mathematical puzzle lies one of the most insidious discoveries in cognitive manipulation history, uncovered through a series of mysterious events that began in a probability research institute in 1994 and has since revealed how the lottery paradox serves as the perfect blueprint for systematic exploitation of human probability confusion, enabling institutions to manufacture false certainty while manipulating decision-making through deliberate conflation of high probability with absolute truth. Dr. Margaret Thornfield, a brilliant probability theorist and cognitive psychologist at the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton, was found dead in her office on a rain-soaked March morning in 1994, apparently from complications related to a severe panic attack that had caused fatal cardiac arrest. The 39-year-old researcher, internationally respected for her groundbreaking work on probabilistic reasoning and belief formation and the psychology of uncertainty manipulation, had been investigating how the lottery paradox operated in real-world decision-making when she uncovered something that would ultimately cost her her life. Her office displayed signs of intense intellectual struggle, with probability calculations covering every available surface, while her computer showed evidence of frantic attempts to model decision-making errors before her death. A note found hidden inside her copy of Kolmogorov's Foundations of Probability Theory, written in increasingly desperate handwriting, read, "They don't want people to understand that the lottery paradox is being weaponized to create false certainty in probabilistic systems. It's not just about mathematical reasoning, it's the fundamental mechanism for making people confuse high probability with absolute truth, enabling systematic manipulation of beliefs and decisions. If people understood that probable doesn't mean certain, they could resist institutional exploitation of uncertainty confusion." Margaret had been working on what she called Project Probabilistic Awareness, a comprehensive investigation into how the lottery paradox structure was being systematically exploited to manipulate public understanding of risk, uncertainty, and probability across multiple domains, including finance, insurance, politics, healthcare, and consumer decision-making through deliberate confusion between likelihood and certainty. Her research assistant, a young mathematician named Nassim Taleb, who would later become famous for his work on probability and black swan events, knew that Margaret had discovered something that threatened powerful systems built on maintaining public confusion about probability while profiting from decision-making errors that resulted from conflating high likelihood with absolute certainty. The mystery began 7 years earlier when Margaret noticed something profoundly disturbing while analyzing various institutional communications about risk and probability, realizing that most organizations systematically exploited lottery paradox confusion to make people believe that highly probable outcomes were absolutely certain, while hiding the reality that even extremely unlikely events remained possible and could have devastating consequences. Margaret's initial observations were revolutionary when she applied lottery paradox analysis to real-world probabilistic systems including financial markets, insurance policies, medical treatments, political predictions, and consumer products. She found that virtually all institutional messaging deliberately confused high probability with certainty while exploiting human tendency to treat likely outcomes as guaranteed results. Using rigorous mathematical analysis combined with cognitive psychology, behavioral economics, and institutional communication studies, Margaret had been documenting how the lottery paradox operated throughout modern society as both a natural cognitive limitation and a deliberately exploited tool for manipulating beliefs and decisions through systematic confusion about the relationship between probability and certainty. The paradox evidence revealed that humans consistently failed to distinguish between high probability and absolute certainty, making them vulnerable to manipulation by institutions that presented likely outcomes as guaranteed while hiding the reality that probabilistic systems always contained uncertainty and potential for unexpected results. Modern research in behavioral economics and decision science has since validated Margaret's discoveries using advanced experimental techniques and real-world data analysis. Research conducted at various institutions including MIT, Stanford, and the University of Chicago has consistently confirmed that people demonstrate systematic confusion between probability and certainty while being highly susceptible to manipulation through deliberate conflation of likelihood with truth. Dr. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky's research on cognitive biases and probability judgment provided the foundation for understanding how the lottery paradox operated in human decision-making, while later research has demonstrated how this confusion is systematically exploited by institutions that profit from maintaining public misunderstanding about uncertainty and risk. Margaret's research revealed that the lottery paradox was not merely an abstract philosophical puzzle, but a practical tool for identifying and exploiting systematic errors in probabilistic reasoning that made people vulnerable to manipulation through false certainty while preventing accurate assessment of risk and uncertainty in complex systems. The institutional conspiracy that Margaret uncovered was more sophisticated than traditional forms of manipulation because it operated through mathematical confusion rather than obvious persuasion or coercion. Her hidden files revealed that various financial, political, insurance, and corporate organizations had developed systematic approaches for exploiting lottery paradox confusion, while presenting high probability outcomes as certain, while hiding uncertainty and risk. Financial institutions regularly exploited probability confusion by presenting investment strategies as guaranteed to succeed, while hiding the reality that even highly probable financial outcomes remained uncertain and subject to unexpected market conditions. Insurance companies used identical strategies to present coverage as certain protection while obscuring the probabilistic nature of risk assessment and claim processing. Margaret had discovered what she termed systematic probability manipulation, a phenomenon where institutions deliberately exploited lottery paradox confusion to present likely outcomes as certain, while hiding uncertainty and risk in ways that served institutional interests, rather than enabling accurate decision-making by individuals and organizations. But the implications extended far beyond institutional manipulation. When people understood the lottery paradox as a warning about probability confusion, they could begin making more accurate decisions under uncertainty while recognizing when institutions were exploiting their natural tendency to confuse likelihood with certainty. Margaret's breakthrough came when she started analyzing not just how the lottery paradox created decision-making errors, but how understanding its warning about probability confusion could inform more accurate approaches to risk assessment and uncertainty navigation that avoided the cognitive traps that made people vulnerable to manipulation. The research revealed that the lottery paradox demonstrated the fundamental importance of maintaining clear distinctions between probability and certainty, showing that rational belief formation required accepting uncertainty, even when dealing with highly likely outcomes, while avoiding the false confidence that came from treating probable events as guaranteed. The research also revealed that recognizing lottery paradox patterns provided powerful tools for making better decisions under uncertainty while protecting against manipulation by institutions that exploited probability confusion to present biased information as objective risk assessment. Margaret had been preparing to publish her findings when she began receiving threatening communications from unknown sources warning her to abandon her research. A letter found in her files with all identifying information carefully removed read, "Dr. Thornfield, your research into probability awareness threatens essential institutional arrangements that depend on maintaining public confusion about risk and uncertainty. We strongly advise you to discontinue this line of inquiry for your own safety and the protection of decision-making systems that require participants to accept high probability outcomes as certain guarantees." Her response, drafted but never sent, revealed her determination. "I will not allow probability confusion to continue being exploited for systematic manipulation of public decision-making." People deserve to understand the difference between likely and certain while making informed decisions under uncertainty. The lottery paradox analysis will be published regardless of who benefits from maintaining false certainty and risk confusion. Margaret's death remains mysterious, but her research lived on through Taleb and other colleagues who had witnessed the documentation showing how the lottery paradox revealed fundamental confusion between probability and certainty, while providing tools for more accurate decision-making under uncertainty and protection against institutional manipulation. The research expanded to examine various manifestations of lottery paradox confusion and discovered that this pattern was one of the most pervasive sources of decision-making error and institutional manipulation in modern society, operating across multiple domains while remaining largely invisible to those experiencing its effects. Margaret's hidden research revealed the psychological mechanisms that made lottery paradox confusion so persistent and exploitable, while so difficult for people to recognize and correct. Modern humans, especially those educated to trust institutional authority and scientific certainty, were systematically unable to distinguish between high probability and absolute truth, while making decisions as if likely outcomes were guaranteed results. The cultural programming around scientific certainty and institutional authority had created additional barriers to understanding the lottery paradox as a warning about probability confusion, rather than simply an abstract mathematical curiosity. Most people had been taught to trust expert predictions and institutional risk assessments without understanding that even highly accurate probabilistic models remained uncertain and subject to unexpected outcomes. Accurate probability education bypassed these barriers by providing tools for distinguishing between likelihood and certainty, while understanding how probabilistic systems operated with inherent uncertainty that made even highly probable outcomes subject to potential variation and unexpected results. When people learned to maintain appropriate uncertainty, even about likely outcomes, they could begin making more accurate decisions while protecting against manipulation. The research also revealed that modern people benefited enormously from understanding lottery paradox warnings because it provided frameworks for navigating uncertainty while making better decisions in probabilistic systems that affected everything from financial planning to healthcare choices to career development. Margaret's training protocols taught people to recognize lottery paradox confusion in institutional communications and their own decision-making, while developing strategies for maintaining appropriate uncertainty and making decisions that acknowledge probability rather than seeking false certainty that left them vulnerable to manipulation and poor outcomes. The protocol involved what Margaret called probabilistic literacy, the ability to distinguish between likelihood and certainty while making decisions that appropriately incorporated uncertainty and risk rather than treating probable outcomes as guaranteed results that required no contingency planning or risk management. The research extended beyond theoretical analysis to understanding how lottery paradox confusion affected modern approaches to financial planning, healthcare decisions, career choices, and risk management across various contexts, where institutions exploited probability confusion to manipulate decision-making while hiding uncertainty and risk. The psychological impact of learning about lottery paradox patterns was profound. People felt empowered to make more accurate decisions under uncertainty when they understood the difference between probability and certainty, while developing more sophisticated approaches to risk assessment that incorporated appropriate uncertainty rather than seeking false guarantees. Margaret's research revealed that many financial losses, healthcare disappointments, and career failures in modern contexts occurred because people had been manipulated through lottery paradox confusion that made them treat probable outcomes as certain while failing to prepare for uncertainty and potential variations in expected results. The training involved teaching people to examine institutional communications about risk and probability while recognizing when likely outcomes were being presented as certain guarantees rather than acknowledging the uncertainty inherent in all probabilistic systems. Margaret's protocols addressed the common concern that maintaining uncertainty about probable outcomes would lead to paralysis or poor decision-making.
Her research showed that understanding probability actually enhanced decision-making by enabling more accurate risk assessment while encouraging appropriate contingency planning and risk management that improved outcomes under uncertainty. The timing of probability education proved crucial in Margaret's research. People were most receptive to learning about lottery paradox confusion when they were experiencing consequences of decisions based on false certainty, or when they were beginning to recognize patterns of institutional manipulation through probability confusion. Margaret's protocols addressed the complexity of making decisions under uncertainty while avoiding both false certainty that led to poor risk management and excessive anxiety that prevented effective action in probabilistic systems. The research showed that effective decision-making required accepting uncertainty while taking appropriate action based on available probability information. The research revealed that effective probability education required helping people understand how probabilistic systems operated while developing practical skills for making decisions that incorporated uncertainty and risk rather than seeking impossible guarantee that left them vulnerable to manipulation and poor outcomes. Margaret's work demonstrated that probabilistic literacy was particularly important for people making major life decisions involving finances, healthcare, and career planning, because lottery paradox confusion could lead to devastating consequences when people failed to prepare for uncertainty in systems they mistakenly believed were certain. The financial applications of Margaret's research were revolutionary. Investors who understood lottery paradox warnings were significantly better able to assess risk and manage portfolios while avoiding the false certainty that led to devastating losses when highly probable investment outcomes failed to materialize as expected. The healthcare applications were equally significant. Patients who learned to distinguish between probable and certain medical outcomes were better able to make informed treatment decisions while preparing for uncertainty and potential variations in expected results that could affect their health and quality of life. The insurance applications of Margaret's research created opportunities for consumers to better understand policy terms and risk assessment while recognizing when insurance companies exploited probability confusion to oversell certainty while under-delivering on protection during actual claims situations. The political applications demonstrated how understanding lottery paradox confusion could inform more accurate assessment of political predictions and policy while protecting against manipulation by politicians and media organizations that presented likely outcomes as certain guarantees. The research revealed that lottery paradox confusion had widespread consequences across multiple domains because it affected fundamental decision-making processes while making people vulnerable to systematic manipulation by institutions that profited from maintaining public confusion about probability and certainty. Margaret's research revealed that the lottery paradox pattern was particularly dangerous in contexts involving long-term planning, where probability confusion could lead to inadequate preparation for uncertainty while creating false confidence that left people vulnerable to unexpected outcomes. Research extended to understanding how lottery paradox confusion affected modern approaches to scientific communication and public policy by demonstrating how even highly accurate probabilistic models remained uncertain, while media and political organizations often presented likely outcomes as definitive predictions. Margaret's protocols addressed the complexity of communicating uncertainty while maintaining public confidence in scientific and institutional expertise. The goal was not eliminating trust in probabilistic models, but developing sophisticated public understanding of how uncertainty. The research revealed that effective probability communication required helping people understand the value of probabilistic information while maintaining appropriate uncertainty about outcomes and recognizing when institutions were exploiting probability confusion to manipulate decision-making and risk assessment. Margaret's work demonstrated that probabilistic literacy was a learnable skill that improved with practice and education. People could develop ability to recognize probability confusion, distinguish between likelihood and certainty, and make better decisions under uncertainty, while protecting against manipulation through false certainty. The educational applications of probability research began emerging as curriculum designers incorporated lottery paradox awareness into programs that taught students about decision-making under uncertainty, risk assessment, and critical evaluation of probabilistic claims in various institutional contexts. The research extended to understanding how accurate information about probability affected modern approaches to personal development and goal achievement by demonstrating that accepting uncertainty while taking appropriate action based on probabilistic information produced better outcomes than seeking impossible guarantees. Margaret's research revealed that probabilistic literacy was particularly important for young people who were developing approaches to decision-making and risk assessment that could either enhance or undermine their effectiveness throughout their lives based on their understanding of uncertainty versus false certainty. The measurement applications of probability research allowed individuals and organizations to evaluate decision-making processes while identifying patterns that enhanced or undermined accurate risk assessment and uncertainty navigation in complex probabilistic systems. The research revealed that accurate understanding of probability was particularly crucial during periods of social and economic uncertainty, when the temptation to seek false certainty was high, while maintaining appropriate uncertainty enabled better preparation for various potential outcomes. Margaret's work demonstrated that probability truth was not just a mathematical issue, but had practical implications for personal effectiveness, institutional accountability, and social decision-making, as lottery paradox confusion consistently led to poor outcomes, while probabilistic literacy enabled better navigation of uncertainty. The legacy of Dr. Margaret Thornfield's research continues to transform how people understand probability, certainty, and decision-making under uncertainty. Every time someone recognizes the difference between likely and certain outcomes, maintains appropriate uncertainty about probable results, or resists institutional manipulation through false certainty, they're practicing the probabilistic literacy that Margaret died protecting. Perhaps Margaret understood something so fundamental about probability and human decision-making that it threatened systems built on maintaining public confusion about uncertainty while profiting from poor decisions that resulted from conflating likelihood with certainty. When der Menschen is statical under systems, der Divender Sid Prashdives, that the lottery paradox revealed how institutions could exploit natural cognitive limitations to manipulate beliefs and decisions, while hiding the uncertainty inherent in all probabilistic systems. In a world that profits from probability confusion, while maintaining illusions of certainty about uncertain outcomes, the revolutionary act is learning to distinguish between likelihood and truth. In a society that exploits lottery paradox confusion while punishing accurate uncertainty, the radical choice is maintaining appropriate doubt about probable outcomes while making decisions that incorporate risk and uncertainty. In a culture that mistakes high probability for certainty while hiding the reality that all complex systems contain uncertainty, the transformative decision is developing probabilistic literacy that enables better decision-making while protecting against manipulation through false guarantees. The ultimate truth that Margaret Thornfield discovered and died protecting is that the lottery paradox reveals fundamental confusion between probability and certainty that makes people vulnerable to systematic manipulation, that maintaining appropriate uncertainty about even highly probable outcomes enables better decision-making and risk management, and that understanding probabilistic reasoning empowers people to navigate uncertain systems more effectively while protecting against institutional exploitation of probability confusion. The person who learns to distinguish between likely and certainty becomes infinitely more capable of making effective decisions under uncertainty while resisting manipulation through false certainty that serves institutional rather than individual interests.